This week's episode is sponsored by Neon's Hell of a Summer, starring Finn Wolfhard, Billy Brick, and Fred Heschinger. Hell of a Summer follows a group of counselors in their fight to survive a killer stalking their beloved campgrounds. Wolfhard and Brick's directorial debut is an outrageously bloody and funny homage to the iconic 80s slashers and has been hailed by critics as one of the most entertaining and crowd-pleasing slasher films of the decade that's bound to leave a smile on your face and a knife in your back. Pack your body bags for a hell of a summer. In theaters, April 4th.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be. To be.
You have to control yourself!
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking I don't know why you're getting so hysterical over a little flower. We're talking I'll see you soon, I hope. And we're talking It is happening now! And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking There's No Need for Hate Now. Or Love.
Oh, boy.
I'm actually really glad I had two options for my thing, Joe, because I had the first part of your It's Happening Now as my other option, where she's talking about the rocket ships and spacemen mating with the monkeys.
I mean, that's a good one, too. That's a funny one.
It's really funny, but everyone, yes, we are discussing Philip Kaufman's 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers for our third week of Doppelgangers and Deception. And Joe, this is a first-time watch for you.
First-time watch for me, yeah. So this is the only title this month that, well, on the main feed that we are talking about that I had not seen. Forever on my watch list. No particular reason why I hadn't watched it. It just needed the excuse, right? And yeah, this movie fucking rules.
It's so good, right? Like, we'll talk about this a lot throughout this discussion, but like, yeah, this is a film that I'm actually not too far behind you, Joe. I saw this for the first time last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was funnily enough, it was pre-programmed as the first Terror Tuesday of last year before I got the gig, so I kind of had to go and introduce it but I watched it, of course, beforehand, and then I watched it in the theater. So I've just happened to watch this film 3 times in the past year now.
Okay. Skewing that letterbox, yeah.
It's so good, though. I like all these people in this movie.
That's the big thing. I think it's a really interesting, not riff, but it's a good update on a classic story. You know, this movie is so heavily referenced. I did feel like I had already seen whole sections of it, up to and including that fucking final image, which I did not realize was from the end of the movie.
Oh, you know it was the end of the movie?
No, I thought it was Donald Sutherland being horrified by something he was seeing, not realizing, that's just him as a fucking spoiler alert alien.
Wait. So halfway through the film, did you piece, because once they start screaming at the non-pod people, did you piece together, that's what he's doing in that image?
Oh, yeah. So then it was just a matter of, okay, is that going to be the end, or is that going to happen somewhere in the third act? And because this is a very fatalistic movie, so it seems very obvious that we are not going to win. Like, this is not The Faculty.
Well, but it's also not the 1957 adaptation of this film, which also has a happy ending.
Yeah, I mean, this to me is one of the reasons why it's so obviously a 70s film, because it does have that slightly nihilistic bent to it. But yeah, I gotta say, what an enjoyably well-crafted film. But in terms of things like the sound design, the direction, the cinematography.
The score.
Yeah, like technically firing on all cylinders, but this movie doesn't work if I don't care about the character. So circling back to your, claim, well, this movie has a lot of characters that are memorable, that we root for, we emotionally invest in them. And I think that is so important.
And I think because this is a nearly 2-hour movie that, in my opinion, goes by pretty quickly, but we spend pretty much the first hour getting to know these people. And I feel like if this movie were made today, like a lot of the smaller moments would be cut out of this film.
Oh, 100%. Trace, let me tell you, in anticipation of this, I ended up also watching the Nicole Kidman, Daniel Craig remake, just called The Invasion. And I can tell you that movie strives for characters that you emotionally invest in, and it just absolutely doesn't work. And the film does not work as a result.
Yeah. So I guess that was kind of going to segue into my next question is, like, have you seen any other versions of Invasion of the Body Snatchers? Because I confess, with this tale, like, I think my initiation to this Body Snatchers tale was The Faculty, but I've never read Jack Finney's original novel. I've never seen the 50s film. I've seen this one. I did watch the 90s Body Snatchers last year as well.
Oh, is that Abel Ferrara?
Yes. Basically, that movie is to this what, like, actually not even to this, but it's kind of like the Blob remake version of Body Snatchers is what the 90s one is. It's not as good, I don't think, as this one, but...
I heard the special effects are really good.
They're really good. It's also like they changed the setting so it's set like on a military compound. So every one of these adaptations does something different with the setting, which I appreciate.
Yeah, the Nicole Kidman, Daniel Craig one is set in DC, which I thought was actually going to have more of an impact. And it kind of doesn't. I think it just helps to get the alien invasion going a lot faster because they can get to, like... Nicole Kidman's husband is Jeremy Norton, and he's the head of the CDC. So he just goes, oh, we're giving everybody a shot against this super flu. So everybody line up. And that's clearly how they're actually spreading the alien spores.
Yeah. So it's so funny. I looked some of that up. I've never seen The Invasion. But I remember when it came out and it did not get any good reviews.
No, it was tampered with.
Yeah. So I saw the screenplay was written by the same guy that did the Suspiria remake, David Kajganich. And he was trying, well, I guess the studio hired him to do a straightforward remake of the 50s film, but then he wanted to add in like stuff to reflect contemporary times from 2007, but then the studio didn't like it, so then they bring in the Wachowskis to write some more, and then another director to shoot some more things, and which, as soon as you hear that, you're kind of like, well... we know how this is going to turn out.
It's not as bad as you may expect. It's just a very middle of the road film, but you can definitely tell that they have fucked around in the edit because it opens in media res with Nicole Kidman just hilariously chugging Mountain Dew. It is the most egregious product placement I have seen in a very, very long time, but it's all because in that movie, you absolutely cannot fall asleep because you know how in this movie you fall asleep and you get the pods and the tendrils and that kind of stuff? This is just people spit in your fucking face. Like people are vomiting in people's faces and that's how they get infected. But you have to fall asleep in order for it to take effect. So she's trying to drink the caffeine in Mountain Dew to stay awake.
Yeah, interesting. So it's like because that seems to be a common thread throughout all these adaptations. You know, don't fall asleep. But
Yeah. Like, it's not terrible, folks. I would say it's probably fine if you're interested. It's just got a bunch of things where it feels like, a bunch of people had fingers in it. And then when I was reading the Abel Ferrara one, it sounded like that one actually had a couple of issues as well, where he didn't want to have it be set on that military base. That was what he inherited. They were told, you will do this.
Yeah, well, I will say the effects are good. Also, it has a Kyle from Child's Play 2 in it, which is really fun. And Meg Tilly, who is
Meg Tilly.
She's the patient zero. She's like the Jeffrey in this movie, but it's real good. But okay, well, so let's go back then to the 70s one. So yes, everyone, as I said, Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a readaptation, I'm using that word specifically, of Jack Finney's 1956 novel Body Snatchers, which was, again, adapted into Don Siegel's 1957 film Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And important things to know about that original film is that Siegel felt that he didn't truly get to make the film he wanted to make for two reasons. One, the studio had them remove any comedy from the film after listening to tapes from a test screening in which audience members, as they often do in horror films, would go back and forth from laughing to screaming to gasping to laughing to screaming to gasping. And the studio heard that and was like, oh, no. People should not be laughing during this movie. It ruins the horror. But they were laughing at things that were actually meant to be funny in the movie.
Come on.
They also wouldn't let him do a downer ending. So the fatalistic ending is swapped out for a more positive ending.
Right.
So, 20 years later, Philip Kaufman was thinking about remaking Siegel's film, or as he puts it, again, readapting the novel. And
I don't like that at all.
So here's the thing. He goes to Siegel's office, which I was like, okay, I guess Siegel maybe worked at a studio or something, like whatever. But he's in there talking to him saying, well, I really want to remake Body Snatchers. And while he's in there talking to this guy, the director of the original film, Kevin McCarthy, the lead actor from the original film, walks into the same office because he's also shooting a film on set. And they all start talking to Kaufman about, what they really had in mind for the ending of the original film, which was one that would not let audiences off the hook. And so this intrigued Kaufman and only enhanced his desire to remake the film.
Right.
I love this too. It's like, he just wanted to remake Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and I guess he just got to make it. So cool.
Yeah, no hurdles. No need to purchase that or fight with somebody else and maybe already own the rights to it. Just, no, I want to do it. And I go to this guy's office and we get our downer ending as well.
That's the thing. So, whenever I'm preparing these production histories, I always go for my physical media copy first. And if I feel like there's not enough there, then I'll start looking up like interviews and things like that. And this movie had everything on the Scream Factory Blu-ray, but I was kind of shocked or maybe disappointed a little bit to find out that this is a very harmonious production. There weren't really any hurdles. Everyone got along. Everyone was collaborative. There's not any drama here.
Just smooth sailing. Sometimes you can just make a movie and things go well.
Exactly. So, okay. Kaufman gets in touch with producer Bob Solo, who then approached screenwriter W.D. Richter about writing the film. And Richter agrees immediately. And again, like that conversation we had over the screenwriter of Carrie and kind of how that was trying to get made a few weeks ago. Richter just sort of happened to be in the right place at the right time. But it was also a happy coincidence because he and Kaufman, while they had never worked together before, were actually good friends and traveled in the same Los Angeles circles at the time.
I mean... I'm not always going to suggest that everyone in LA knows each other, but it does often seem, okay, well, if you go to the right parties, if you mix with the right people, eventually you will make a connection that will land you a gig.
Yes, and this is actually the fourth screenplay that Richter had written, and I wanted to bring up the previous films he had done because he worked in films that incorporated comedy, but they weren't always straight up comedies. So his debut film was this 1973 comedy thriller starring James Caan called Slither. So then he follows that up with Peeper, a 1975 mystery comedy starring Michael Caine. And then before he does Body Snatchers, he gets Nickelodeon, which is a straight up comedy starring Ryan and Tatum O'Neal.
Ah, okay.
But I wanted to point this out too, though, because he would go on to write one of my favorite films of all time, John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh my God, so good.
I know, which again, very, very funny, but weird funny movie.
Yeah.
But then he would go on to direct, but not write, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's a pivot.
I was hoping that you would have something to say to that because I've never seen Buckaroo Banzai, but everything I've heard about it is just like wild, wild, wild. So I don't know.
Yeah, maybe something to check out. I'm sure some listener will let us know and say, "Oh no, it's really good. It's worth your time."
I feel like it's one of those ones that I've always heard is like one of the worst movies ever made, but then it's like got a cult following,
Well, that's how it usually goes for cult films, right?
But when approaching Jack Finney's Body Snatchers, Richter admitted that while he was very familiar with the original film, he had never read the novel before and had no idea how it was written, what the tone was, like was it supposed to be comedic, was it not? So he went ahead and read it, and then he read the screenplay for the film adaptation from 1956, and then started working on the script for the 1978 remake. But he was very collaborative with the director, Phil Kaufman. Like, they basically, he would write and send the pages to him immediately, and then they would get on the phone and talk. Like, this is, like, constant what they were doing.
Right.
And it was a really wonderful collaboration because they knew that production would start soon on a fairly low budget, which I couldn't find an official source, but what I did find...
it's so early.
Yeah, $3.5 million is what I was finding, which...
Oh my God.
To me seems a little high, actually.
What? No.
Well, I'm thinking for inflation,
No, still no.
Okay, well, nevertheless, that's what I was seeing, but not from official sources, so take that with a grain of salt. But they didn't spend a lot of time talking about the film having a larger meaning. And this is a direct quote. Like, in Richter's words, it's not political. But here's the thing. So I love this. So he says it wasn't political in that it had nothing to do with, like, communist conspiracies. It had nothing to do with, like, we weren't referencing any specific thing going on at the time.
Okay.
This was just a general vote for don't become a conformist, don't march with the herd, etc. Because I couldn't tell if they wanted it to be timeless or if they now realize, 20 years later when they're doing these interviews that, we're kind of glad we didn't do a specific event because the themes in this film are timeless. Like, you can watch this, not know the political landscape of 1978 and still get what we're doing here,
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's hard because they're probably trying to distinguish themselves from the previous adaptation, and that one is so firmly steeped in McCarthyism, right? So folks, it's all about the witch hunt to sort out communists, and of course that does affect queer people. That's where the lavender scare comes from. But this is interesting. Like, I could not throw a dart at a review for this movie without people talking about Watergate and Nixon and all, like, basically the dissolution of the American fucking dream, anticipating Reagan coming in, and just, I'm like, maybe they didn't intentionally make it that way, but it's hard not to read politics into this film.
I think that's what we've talked about many times over the past couple of weeks, where it's like, okay, so if the movie is political because, like, if you're saying, it's about, like, not being a conformist, like, that in and of itself is a political statement. Exactly. But I guess they're trying to say, like, we just weren't saying, this is Watergate or this is this. Like, we weren't trying to limit ourselves. They didn't
have an agenda.
Yeah, exactly. But that being said, though, like, the therapy idea of explaining away all your issues as psychological projections was very in vogue at the time.
Yeah, that's the piece that I will say feels the most 70s, like, to the point where I couldn't figure out if Leonard Nimoy's Kibner, is he meant to be a bit of a condemnation on, so psychotherapy is a bit of a quack. They're not even going to listen to you, but they're going to diagnose you. So I found this depiction not inherently supportive of getting your mental health issues treated, but then I couldn't figure out if that was because this was still a bit of a new burgeoning thing. Like, I've heard the 70s be referred to as the me decade, where people are actively looking to work on themselves, discover new facets of themselves, like take up a hobby or something. And I couldn't tell if this film was gently poking fun at the idea of, therapy is a form of investing in yourself, but it's also a little narcissistic.
So, I'm glad you mentioned that, especially the me-ness, because Richter, direct quote almost, goes, people had grown so disillusioned with the larger society around them, with the treachery of the government, with things that just weren't working right. So this big inward look started taking place, and the 70s became known as the me generation, a huge cliche of pop culture, but people wanted to establish their own ideas, their identities. And so Leonard Nimoy's character in this movie, he calls him a pop psychologist. So it's like a celebrity psychologist. So I've
heard modern day people refer to him as a kind of Dr. Phil.
Yes. Truthfully, I don't know if this movie is condemning or approving of this character at all. I think he's just, to me, it's the casting of Nimoy as a potentially emotionless, like, thing coming off of, Spock.
Yeah, it feels like we're in on the joke just by casting him in this particular role. But I was really intrigued when I was doing research into how this film was received. Obviously it's a classic, so there's a ton of contemporary reviews in addition to the reviews from the time. But the amount of digital ink that is shed on this particular character, this aspect of the film, like, some people refer to him as the principal antagonist of the film. And I thought that was so interesting because to me, I'm like, no, the aliens as a general entity.
Yeah.
It's the conformity that's the antagonist. But then I thought, if you distill it into a single character, what Kibner does and how he is ultimately presented does make him the main antagonist.
Well, actually, question for you, though. Do you think we ever get to meet Kibner, or is it always his double? Because I part of me thinks that the first time we meet him at the book signing, it's still Kibner.
It's still him. Yeah. I was actually going to play this game with you as well and say, I do agree with you. I think that there is a point where we can start to read him as, he's been taken over. I think most people read it as when he gets called to the spa, the bats.
I think so too. But because he's the one that gets rid of the body.
Yeah, but he still has emotional moments. Like, I think the dead giveaway is when he tells Jeffrey at one point, he gets into a car. I don't even think we see him say it. We just hear him say it. Like, it can't happen soon enough. As in, we need to get these people potified.
Oh, by then, for sure. Like, that's the reveal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, yeah, I think when he gets to the spa, I think he's already infected by that point. Or I'm sorry, it's not infected. Wow. I have questions about what actually happens to these people because I'm a little confused.
Oh my God, baby. That was one of my favorite reveals in this film because I was clocking those dump trucks throughout the entire first, I want to say, hour and 10, just being like, okay, is that just how they're moving the pods around or something? Oh my God, it's so dark.
I told you last week that in our outro that this film has one of the most upsetting character deaths I've ever seen. And I mean, Elizabeth dissolving.
Oh my God.
Is that not like in a PG movie? I know PG-13 didn't exist, but like it was shocking to me.
It's shocking. It's fantastic. I mean, we haven't talked about the special sort of makeup effects. They were done by Thomas Berman as well as Edouard Henrique. And the look of these creatures. But even, just when people start to get dehydrated and a little husky.
The detail on Jeff Goldblum's lips the entire time. Yeah.
No, it's real fucking good. I've got a Cronenberg comparison. Not that I want to make a Cronenberg comparison every fucking other week, but yeah, this did remind me in a couple of moments of Rabid, which is also about another kind of outbreak that happens in the big city.
Which actually would have been coming out around this time too, maybe a little bit before this.
I think it was 77. It might be 78 though.
77, actually, you're correct.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, we were getting some really good fucking sci-fi horror around these times.
Well, so one thing, though, that Richter and Kaufman knew they were going to do was they wanted to make this a sort of dark comedy. And that the biggest change was going to take it out of a small town environment into a big city, which
I love.
Well, and here's the thing, though. The first draft that Richter wrote was set in a small town and stuck very close to the original. But one afternoon, during a meeting with Kaufman, about a month before filming was supposed to start, they realized they had made a huge mistake and that the threat to the individual should be in an urban area. And they went to their producers like, hey, we fucked this up. Like, we want to rewrite the script.
Okay. Whoa.
So this is the one drama, but it's not drama because it worked out fine. Because Bob Solo, their producer, was like, hey, if you can get it done in time by the time the shoot starts, do it. But this is also why Richter was pretty much on set the entire time, changing everything from a little backwater town to a big metropolis. But like, I think that's where that collaborative relationship between him and Kaufman came in, because Kaufman wanted him there. And whenever they were often making changes the day of, but it wasn't out of like a bad thing, you know, like,
it wasn't a desperation.
Yeah, we're running out of time. But it was more so like they were creative, just coming up with ideas on the fly.
Right. Like, how could this work? Okay, if we're in this new location, so many more people, different kinds of streets. Because, folks, part of my queer reading is that, we're set in San Francisco. We're talking about conformity and, like, mass homogenization of attitudes and beliefs and so on. But, I mean, I've never been to San Francisco, but this movie makes me feel like I have been to certain parts of San Francisco because the city is an absolute character.
Agreed. The only thing I didn't like about it was, and people from San Francisco, please, like, tell me if you think I'm right here, but like, there were not enough hills in the streets of this San Francisco. Like, this looked more like New York to me.
Yeah, there were a couple of points where I thought, shouldn't we be a little bit more hilly? But there is the one part where they have to escape from, I want to say, Matthew's apartment, and they have to go down all these different flights of stairs, and then they're running down a hill. And I was like, maybe there's a little bit more of the San Francisco. But I wondered how much of that is touristy, where that's the San Francisco we're always shown in movies, as opposed to maybe what it's actually like.
Well, because I'm telling you, I've been driving up one of those street hills in San Francisco and almost like just rolled right back down.
Terrifying. This is why I would never do manual in San Francisco.
Yeah. But I will say, though, this is also why Richard believes that it's important to have a writer around, even like for location scouting, because if you need something rewritten on the fly, then the writer is already immersed in it, which is why, again, if we ever feel like watching Buckaroo Banzai, but when he directed Buckaroo Banzai, he said that I want the writer like on set with me.
Right.
Because I need that help. But yeah, so I love this too. The big reason for the change to the big city, they were like, oh, it's a big cities where you could lose your individuality. But then their second reasoning, it's a more exciting thing to aim a camera at.
Truly. Yeah. I mean, imagine, well, again, if we had watched the original, I'm sure we would know what it feels like. But I feel like we've seen countless iterations. Like you mentioned Slither, but not the Slither I'm thinking of. We've seen, quarantine. We've seen mass alien threat or something happen in the small town. I referenced the faculty.
I mean, the Blob.
Yeah, so we've seen it 1,000 times before. And it's not that just having more people is inherently more threatening, but you're right, it is more visually interesting if you're trying to avoid people because you don't know who you can trust. Like, this movie is a paranoid conspiracy movie at its heart, and that just, the threat level is magnified by 100, by 1,000, when all of a sudden you've got countless faces. Like, the crowd scenes in these movies in a big city is so much different than, oh, well, there's Farmer Joe. He's looking at me weirdly.
I think that's what makes this one scarier to me, is because, I mean, like, any version of the story is inherently scary just based on its premise. Yeah. But I think there's something about where you're like, oh, I can be safe in a city because there's so many people here. It's going to take a while before it gets to me.
Sure.
And maybe that's just me thinking that because I'm just like how would I survive this?
Uh-huh.
But that's not the case here. This movie makes it very clear. Oh, this takes like 48 hours tops for these aliens to take over the city.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of Robert Heinlein's Puppet Masters. There's a 90s version of that movie, which I'm quite fond of. I'm not going to argue it's a good film. I did talk about it on Movie Oubliette with Conrad and Dan.
Heinlein, like the Starship Troopers guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately a real shit dude in real life, but interesting stories. But it's the same kind of idea where the alien threat, there's parasites. They're really interesting creature design. They basically attach to the back of your neck and down your back. So it's easier to spot. But yeah, they've got this whole plan about infecting people. And they do the kind of CDC military forecast. Okay, well, if they had X many amount of people, how long would it take to get from here to here to here? And it's always 2 to 3 days.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Well, either way, this is horrifying.
Basically, being in a big city during these kinds of incidents or events is not a good place to be.
I see. My mind always goes to Independence Day, where I'm just like, okay, just don't be in like a big city like that, and you'll probably be fine. As if the aliens are going to know to go to New York City or DC.
I guess it depends on how intelligent they are.
I guess that is true, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the fun things about this movie is the insinuation is that it's not like, oh, we just get a little bit of alien rain hitting San Francisco. That's just where the story is told, but I read this as, oh, it's actually happening everywhere.
Yeah, I did too. Like, we're just seeing one part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, okay, so Invasion of the Body Snatchers was released in theaters on December 22nd, 1978. Perfect holiday counter-programming.
Ooh.
And against its supposed production budget of $3.5 million, it went on to gross $24.9... We're just going to call it $25 million worldwide. I don't think there was an international release, or if there was no reporting on it.
Sure.
I will say too, I watched the Siskel and Ebert review of this movie, and they both liked it.
Okay,
but it's really funny because there are two things that I just like. It's just of the time where I was like, "That's really funny." One is they were complaining about how horrible the Christmas movie season was. There were no good movies, and at least Invasion of the Body Snatchers was one of the good ones.
All right.
I had to look it up. I was like, well,
Superman. You were like, what else came out?
Superman came out the week before this movie came out. So I was like, that must be another one. But there were a lot of films.
Better be.
There were a lot of films in December where I was like, oh, I've never heard of that movie. So maybe there's a reason why I never heard of that movie. But
yeah.
But the other thing was they were really, really bitching about, like, again, they give Invasion of the Body Snatchers a good review. Mm-hmm. But then they're like, but God, like everything this year is a sequel or a remake. I just wish people had original ideas. Like to the point where Siskel he almost sounded like he felt bad recommending this movie because it was a remake.
Heaven forbid. Here's the thing, folks. There's only so many original ideas. It's what you do with it.
I just think it's funny that it's like, oh, like 50 years ago, we were still arguing about this shit.
Yeah, it is kind of wild.
But reviews at the time were mixed, but of course, the film has since gone on to be known as one of the greatest sci-fi films ever made, as well as one of the best remakes ever made. We are looking at a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 8.3 out of 10, and Letterboxd users have awarded it a 7.8 out of 10. And I also do love this. So the director talks about the box office success of the film, and he attributes a portion of it to the fact that the Jonestown Massacre happened a month before this film came out.
Yeah, that was a really perplexing piece of information to come across, because I covered Jonestown on my podcast with Jen, so I did a shit ton of research on that, and it's such a bizarre lens to look at this film through, because it is definitely about the dangers of mass conformity. Like, it's about a cult, and people... that's where we get the saying, drink the Kool-Aid, and it's actually horribly inappropriate to even make that. So, folks, if you're using it in your everyday life, maybe don't.
Because a bunch of people died when they drank the Kool-Aid?
Trace, it was the biggest...
Oh, no, I know. I know what Jonestown is.
No, but, like, people don't know this. My quote-unquote favorite stat to come out of the research was that before 9/11, it was the largest, like, mass casualty of U.S. citizens in one single event.
Whoa.
It was 900 people.
Jesus Christ.
People are always like, oh, 50 people. And you're like, no, it was, like, it was the size of a small town.
Yeah, like they were on, like, an island or something, weren't they?
They were in Guyana. It was not an island, no.
Well, no. I guess not a small town?
No. Guyana is an entire country.
Okay. Well, anyway, but Kaufman's quote on that, though, he says, that was a case of a lot of people from San Francisco were looking for a better world and suddenly found themselves in poddom, and it was fatal. It could not have been a more pointed reason for watching this movie. So I guess were there a lot of people from San Francisco in the...
Yeah, it's they set up somewhere between, like, San Francisco and Los Angeles, like, they basically bought out a small town and then turned it into a mega church. But they were getting a lot of disenfranchised people. So they were going after teenage runaways.
People who were vulnerable.
Exactly that. Yeah.
God. Well, okay.
It's dark. But this movie's dark, too.
Yeah, but it's also funny.
Oh, boy. It's funny, though. I wouldn't say this movie is overly comedic.
No, but I think it's the lived-in human moments that aren't dealing with, like, the sci-fi alien invasion. They are funny because they just feel so authentic and natural. Like, I could see myself having these interactions with a lot of these characters, and I will say it's also really fun because, like, on the Blu-ray, we have interviews with definitely Brooke Adams, who, by the way, not Karen Allen, right? Like,
no,
she just looks like her. Like, they need to be in a movie together. And Veronica Cartwright's on it too. But, like, they're just talking about how much fun they were having. Like, they were in their 20s. They were kids having fun, like, just doing their shit. Like, they hung out with Jeff Goldblum all the time. They danced, and it's like, oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah. I mean, the process of shooting a movie is going to be arduous, and I'm sure it can be taxing with the long days, but yeah, if you've got a good group of people, it should be an enjoyable experience, even if the movie you're making is not.
I mean, that's what it is. And so I don't know, I do laugh in this movie, but I wouldn't call it a comedy in any shape, way, or form.
Yeah, I found a lot of the Jack Belichick and Kibner interactions humorous, at least early on.
Oh, yeah, and I actually think Veronica Cartwright does a pretty good hysterical woman, but she's really funny in this.
I think she's arguably the second most empathetic character.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Like, to the point where even though she's the only person to make out of this movie alive, she won't as soon as the credits roll.
Oh, God, no. Yeah. Nobody's making it out of this movie.
No, they win. We lose.
Thank you, the faculty. Okay, so we begin on a foreign planet, which I'm always interested to see, okay, how much of your budget do you allocate for this, and how long does it take you to shoot this? Because, we get most of the opening credits over this, and it's not like the most spectacular design I've ever seen. It kind of looks a little bit like, have you ever seen the cotton candy machines that you see at the fair?
Oh, yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. And this is like a goo they use, but like in the water, it looks like light as cotton candy.
Yeah, so we see these jellyfish type things spawning. They launch into outer space towards Earth, and then we get some chubby rain falling down. I'm hoping at least one person will get that jokey reference. But
chubby rain? What is the reference?
Well, if I have to explain it, it's not as
that's
fun,
true.
is it?
Everyone
No, it's a line from Bowfinger.
Oh, got it. I will say though, like this opening with because again we start on the alien planet, and they're getting up, they're going through space, and then we see Earth. This is the opening for Mars Attacks.
It is, because Mars Attacks is indebted to this, but also if you think of it, obviously we will cover Mars Attacks sometime down the line.
Yeah.
Obviously, it is not only indebted to this. It had its own line of playing cards and stories and so on. It has a long history as an IP as well.
Yeah.
But I think at least the movie Mars Attacks definitely has at least a couple of homages to this.
Oh, probably so, which is kind of weird considering I think it came out 4 or 5 months after Independence Day and flopped really bad.
Yeah, it's just too weird.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get this rain falling, and we can see that it has an unusual texture and consistency. It just looks thick.
Viscous.
And kind of, viscous. Thank you. Disgusting. So we see it collecting all around the flora of San Francisco. And I'm going to bring in the first of 2 references I have for this. The first one is by Brandon Stanwyck, and he did a post on Stephen King. So he went through all of the film references that Stephen King makes in Danse Macabre, and so Invasion of the Body Snatchers is apparently one of them. So Stephen King likes this movie, likes this story, and so Brandon Stanwyck wrote a piece on the film called Invasion of the Body Snatchers Film Review. It's for the site Fearsome Queer, and in regards to the San Francisco setting, Stanwyck says, Kaufman setting the film in urban San Francisco stresses the point that every city on the planet is vulnerable to hostile, systematic homogenization efforts, even the most eclectic and open-minded locales. So I was trying to think of, is there something specifically queer about this movie?
Mm-hmm.
Apart from the doppelganger element, which is what we're looking at this month. And I did think that it was an interesting idea to say, okay, so the city that is just so well known in the United States for being this mecca, right? It becomes an oasis where queer people would specifically travel to for safety. And it's all about the open-mindedness, living your truth, being your authentic self, your individual self. And then we set this movie, which is all about eliminating that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting, though, because there's not a queer character in this movie that we can tell. I mean, that's the 1978 Ava, I would assume. But I feel like watching it now, you can just kind of fill in the blanks yourself.
Well, until we even say that Jack is married to Nancy, I thought, I'm getting some interesting energy off of Mr. Goldblum. But then I realized it's kind of just Mr. Goldblum.
It's just Goldblum. It's his natural charisma. It just makes you want to have sex with him.
I mean, he's a little too skinny in this movie. I prefer my beefed up boy from The Fly.
Okay.
But yes, okay. So we get to see this great shot of tendrils spreading along the leaves, and then these pink flowers begin to appear with the red bud in the center. And I'm not going to say that this movie is revolutionary for some of these makeup and special effects, but I was legitimately shocked how well they look and how well they have held up.
I know. I couldn't tell if it was maybe something stop motion related, how they were doing that, or was it puppets?
It looks a little bit, hey?
Yeah. I mean, the pods are definitely, like when the humans are coming out of them, that's puppet shit. But these little ones, I couldn't tell.
It's just kind of fun. Yeah, I would love to know. But
which maybe that's the sign of a good effect.
Right? Yes. Yeah. So we are introduced to Elizabeth here. We don't actually know her name or her character or what she's doing, obviously played by Brooke Adams, but she's walking around, and so are several other kids, because this is just a nice park in San Francisco. People are picking these flowers because they're pretty. Also, yes, folks, the priest is Robert Duvall, and he is not a character. This is just a cameo. I don't even know if Robert Duvall was inherently famous at this point. So Elizabeth returns home to her distracted, I'm going to say boyfriend. I saw some places say boyfriend, some places say husband.
I wrote husband at first, but then the longer the movie went on, I feel like Matthew, the Donald Sutherland character, says boyfriend at one point later in the film.
Yeah.
Fun fact, this is Art Hindle's first American film after immigrating to America, and his second film after Black Christmas.
Yeah, this is another interesting performance from him. I find him hugely compelling as an actor. I was a little disappointed he doesn't get to do more here, but I think the few scenes he has as regular Jeffrey compared to scary, automaton Jeffrey, it's night and day difference. And I think that it's such a vital role for helping us to immediately understand the stakes. Like, it doesn't work if he doesn't do this shift well enough.
Yeah, it's a daunting task on Hindle's part, but he does it really well. Even though, again, he's not really the main character, the main villain, but he's there, he's present. And it's interesting because I feel like, especially with his relationship with Elizabeth, we don't know anything about it because... Again, for a 2-hour movie, we're kind of off to the races. Like, he is infected in the first 5 minutes of this movie. And so we don't really know anything about their life pre-invasion, except that he likes whatever sports game they're going to go to.
He likes the Warriors, which is a basketball team.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought they made it up for the movie.
No, it is a real league, a real team.
But I love those. So the way this is shot. So she goes in the house and she walks into, I guess, like a lounge they have or a sitting room or whatever. And he's in there and the camera stays way back down the hall to where we can only see the doorway. And for this entire scene where she is explaining the biology of the flower and what it might be or
this
whatever.
Rex flower, it's cross-pollinating, it's an invasive species, blah, blah, blah. But we're
slowly zooming into this doorframe. But we never see Elizabeth this entire time. We can only hear her.
No, and I think we're seeing him, but he's actually reflected in the mirror, if I'm not mistaken.
Ooh, you might be right. We should actually add to the double visuals that we're dealing with here. But this also, because this gives the impression that we're eavesdropping on a private conversation, and I love that.
That's contributing, I would argue, to the paranoid conspiracy vibe as well, right? It just feels like we're privy to a bunch of things that we maybe shouldn't know or that are secrets, right? There's a point where Elizabeth mentions that she follows Jeffrey all day. She sees him meet with a bunch of people she doesn't know. But even before that, she says, it feels like people are passing secrets between each other.
Well, I like, too, because multiple people will start saying, this isn't my husband, this isn't my wife, this isn't this person.
Yeah.
And
oh, my God. It's so chilling.
Well, I love how quickly, too, people are this is... Because the fact of the matter
is...
if your significant other had a shift in behavior like this, yes, you would absolutely know.
Yeah. And what we learn of Jeffrey, because you're right, we barely know anything about him. So he's a dentist, we will come to find out, but we don't know it here. He loves basketball, and they have a kind of slightly standoffish relationship where, she ends up cuddling up into bed with him after this, but it's she's trying to get his attention to talk about this flower. He doesn't really care. He's just listening to his music, to the game on the headphones and so on. So we have an understanding that their lives are different, even though they're sharing the same space. But that's also unique to them. This is the nature of their relationship. And she wakes up in the morning. He's already fully dressed in his 3-piece going to work suit.
And she's waking up early too, because we have this whole conversation where Donald Sutherland's please come in at 7:30, and she's like, oh, do I have to?
I love that.
It's so relatable.
I'm not coming in before 8. No, please. Okay, fine. I will come in before 8. But when she wakes up, she's woken up early. He's already fully dressed. He is cleaning up broken glass, which I love that we don't even need to see the plant do anything to him. It's not a surprise that he has been taken over, because that's we inherently understand what has happened.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, of course, does not, but she can't even get his attention. And I think at one point she just says, won't you just talk to me? Why can't you just be nice? Or why can't we just have it be nice? And I thought, oh my God, this is the most relatable couple stuff where you're just let's not fight. We don't need to do this right now. Let's just stop and be fine. Okay.
And he's like, sorry, I have to go take out this bag of husk and hair to the garbage truck.
Yeah.
Husk and hair. I've read that so many times in my notes. More garbage trucks with husk and hair.
Yeah. And of course, we don't understand what that is. We just think that he's been cleaning up some broken glass and maybe the remains of this plant that she brought home. But we are looking out the window at him because she's concerned. She doesn't understand why he's acting this way. And we see him exchange words with this guy who is collecting the garbage. And you're just oh, it's already fucking happening.
Yeah. Just immediately.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the things I liked more about this. Well, one of many things I liked about this movie more than I liked the Nicole Kidman, Daniel Craig one.
Yeah.
That one, they specifically target Jeremy Northam because I think he is the head of the CDC. So there's this deliberate attempt to go after high-ranking people of influence. Whereas this, the plants didn't specifically pick Elizabeth or Jeffrey. It just happened to be whoever picked the flower and brought it home.
Yeah. But even still, though, I mean, like, I called Jeffrey patient zero at the beginning, but truthfully, I think a lot of people are patient zero in this movie.
This is just day one, and yeah, you're right. There's probably hundreds of patient zeros.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring Stanway back in. Part of the reason I like their piece is because there's a really funny gay stereotype in it, which I'm just going to read here. So Stanwyck says, plant gays would be the first to go. No self-described plant daddy would see day 2 of the invasion. They'd 100% bring suspicious-ass space flora into their home just because it looks exotic and expensive, and then they would unwittingly initiate the takeover. Here's how it would happen. A plant gay in athletic wear goes to the park. Whether or not they plan to exercise is immaterial. Once there, and taking the requisite selfie next to a shrub or something, they'd spot a unique-looking flower. Oh, work, bitch, they'd whisper. Cut to the plant gay's apartment. They're in a jock and crop top now, taking flirty photos with the newest addition to their indoor forest. That night, as their DMs are blowing up, the space flora bursts an exact duplicate, and then we're off.
Which, honestly, though, like, the gay plant would probably just want to fuck itself anyway, so they probably welcome the duplicate.
Indeed. Oh, I get to be just like my boyfriend? Oh, wait, we're already identical.
I mean, that is the thing. I guess I forget, like, you're trying to figure out the whole movie, like, exactly what is... Because you think that they just get possessed or something by these aliens, and...
Right, like, where are the bodies? Where are the real people that they have taken over?
Yeah, so you think, okay, it's probably, like, a microscopic, like, life form that just gets inside them, and bam, they're there, the person is not, and that is not what happens.
No, that's actually what happens in the Daniel Craig, Nicole Kidman, though, one.
Yeah,
like, there is no body.
Type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's honestly, I've seen some people refer to this as a bit of a zombie film, right? Because it does feel like you've got these mindless hordes who are chasing after you, trying to infect you.
Yeah.
And I can definitely see it. I would say it's maybe adjacent if we're doing semantics, but it's harder to make the argument here, in part because there is a waste element to this. Like, the fact that we are leaving behind bodies and those people are not there anymore.
Yeah.
It's not just, oh, my mind has been removed. It's like, no, we didn't even need your body. We didn't care about your body. We just needed the outline of it.
Well, because that's what Leonard Nimoy says. Like, we are here just to survive. Like, it's not hate, it's not love. Like, our goal is just to survive at any expense. And yeah, but that's the fatalist part, you know, where it's like, oh, there's no hope for anyone that's been turned because they're dead. Like, they are fully dead.
Yeah. And it was interesting because obviously you and I have both seen The Faculty, which is drawing pretty heavily on this, in addition to a couple of other paranoid conspiracy sci-fi takeover kind of movies. But I feel like it's most indebted to this one. And that happy ending, like we talked about it, how much we fucking hate what they do.
Yeah.
But also just seeing how dark this one is and how much more impactful the end of it is as a result. The Faculty feels like an extra dose of cop-out.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. It's still fun, but
still good.
That ending still, it's still just a knife twist.
Okay. So let's meet our protagonist. We have Department of Health Inspector Matthew Bonnell, who is played by Donald Sutherland. Good old Canadian boy. Very sad. It was actually kind of hard to watch this and be like, oh, right, he just died last year.
In the past year, yeah.
So he is introduced eviscerating the food standards at this French restaurant, and I could see some people arguing that he is almost dispassionate about, like, he's so ruthlessly efficient with how he negotiates this. He's taking all of the emotion out of it, but I would almost argue the opposite. He's so invested in this, he can't help but, like, rile up this kitchen staff to the point where they break his fucking windshield.
Well, I actually thought it was a really interesting choice to have this be his profession, because I get that it does come into play, like, where they have the lab at their disposal a little bit, but not to where like, you could change his profession, it would still, like, not change
Super
too much
easily.
about the movie. But I love it. In any other movie, the health inspector of a restaurant is the villain of the film. Like, Ratatouille said, get out.
Yes.
And I love that, yeah, they have us being like, and again, this comedic beat with this, is it a rat turd or is it a caper? Which, by the way, continues when he runs into Elizabeth and he's like, hey, what do you think this is? And she's like, it's a caper. And it's like, oh, we're still doing this. Okay.
Yeah. No, you're right. There are definitely funny bits that come into play. I think I'm so emotionally overwhelmed by the implication. I find this movie dread-inducing because we can tell from the outset how quickly things are spreading. And it feels like it's taking our characters forever to catch on.
Which is really funny, though, because I feel like, again, I guess
it doesn't bother me. Well, Any other movie, I'm like, get your fucking heads out of your asses and figure out what's going on. And in this movie, I'm just like, oh my God, when are they going to figure it out? It's going to be too late.
Which I guess when they do figure it out, I'm kind of like, oh, wow, they figured out all of that really quickly. But it is over an hour into the film.
It doesn't feel that way at all, though, does it?
Not at all.
Okay, so yes, this is our introduction to Matthew, and he calls Elizabeth because he wants her to come in and test this, blah, blah, blah. Jeffrey gets infected the next morning. He's acting very differently. I do love this moment where, she watches Jeffrey as he's throwing out the trash, and then we get an almost jump scare with the cuckoo clock.
Oh, I know. And this isn't a jump scare movie. Like, that's not what this movie does often.
It's not doing it, no, but the way that this is edited is we go from her being startled by that, and then we cut to a man just running down the middle of this downtown street. And we don't know who this person is. I didn't go back to check to see if it's the man that they hit with the car who ends up getting killed by the crowd, who, yes, I know, is actually the
original
lead.
Actor,
yeah.
But hey, if you didn't know this, though, they did kind of make up because they don't give him a name in the film. They just call him the Running Man. No,
he's just Running Man.
But the idea, because the original film ends with him, like, he alerts the authorities, and like they haven't stopped the invasion, but like, oh, the government's going to step in and help. That's kind of how the original ends.
Okay.
And so they said, oh, well, what if we just kind of make this an actual sequel of sorts, where it's like, oh, no one paid attention to him, and that this is still that character from that movie.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? I've lived through this once, and we dealt with it. I have seen people write about this movie after COVID and like coronavirus and so on. And like, it's also very easy to read as a kind of pandemic film. This idea that we survived it once, but it comes back again. And if people don't take it seriously, if people don't listen to the science and so on, here we are again. It's all cyclical.
Yep.
Also, Tabitha, the Running Man. Another Stephen King.
That is Stephen. Wait, I thought that was the Lawnmower Man. Did Stephen King also do the Running Man?
He did.
Oh my God! All these men.
I mean, I said there's a finite number of stories. The problem is that they're all Stephen King.
They're all Stephen. Gotta get those dollar babies, y'all.
Oh my God, that man. He is going to retire and or die a very rich man.
Oh, fuck. We're getting a Running Man remake this year, too, aren't we?
We are, with Glenn Powell.
And Edgar
directed by
Wright.
Edgar Wright.
Shit, this year? Fuck.
Yeah, I think it's in December.
Okay, well.
So, ways away. Okay, so we see Elizabeth at work. She's telling Matthew about Jeffrey's unusual behavior. It is immediately evident the chemistry between these two.
Okay.
He is so obviously in love with her. I just don't know if she knows. I think she probably does. I don't know.
I actually really... It's very adult, the way this relationship is handled. Because again, in any other film, this would be a love triangle situation, which is so played out. And the problem is that we literally can't have that here because Jeffrey...
We just don't have time.
Well, and Jeffrey's infected 10 minutes in.
Yeah.
But I like the way this is done. And of course, Elizabeth will eventually tell Matthew that she loves him, albeit possibly under duress. I'm not really sure. But
well, it's like, I need to tell someone I love them before I probably die.
Yeah, exactly that.
Horrifying.
But I agree. No, they have some fantastic chemistry in this movie. And I actually didn't look and see what the age difference was, but I don't know Brooke Adams from that many things. Again, the first time I watched this, I thought for sure it was Karen Allen. I was like, that's Karen Allen. I didn't even second guess it.
It does look like Karen Allen. Yeah, it really does.
But I really like her. Like, she is so charming in this movie.
No, I think that they are a great fit. I was surprised because I definitely knew Donald Sutherland was the lead. As I said, I've seen the images. I didn't perceive that she was going to be a co-lead. I thought that she was just going to be some random romantic interest who was probably going to die 20 minutes in, and that would be the impetus to get the story going on his end.
Well, it's because anything that you see about this movie is always that last fucking shot.
Yes.
And she's not there because she's already dead.
Well, she is dead by that point.
I guess you might think that Veronica Cartwright was the second co-lead.
Yeah, I mean, she also got more screen time than I was expecting.
And this is the year before Alien comes out, too, so Veronica Cartwright was, like, on the up and up.
Uh-huh. Yeah, she was clicking. Okay, so we're talking about Jeffrey's unusual behavior, and Matthew isn't buying it. Like, he does say at one point, maybe you should think about leaving him, but the more she talks about it, the more we're just kind of like, okay, well, I don't know what you want me to say. I'm trying to be a supportive friend.
Yeah, I have a shrink that you can go talk to. You want to go talk to him? But here's the thing, though. It doesn't come off as patronizing to me. Like, it does come from a place of care, but it's like, I don't know what to do for you, but I have a friend who's a psychiatrist, and I think just try it out. Give it a shot.
Yeah. And she's not super interested in that, but when she goes home that night and she finds out that Jeffrey has given away their Warriors tickets because he just doesn't care anymore. And she's like, what the fuck is going on?
Well, okay, there's a really good moment here. Maybe I missed it. Correct me if I'm wrong. But so there's a moment where she's like, behind him and she gasps at something on the back of his neck. And we will learn that it's a scar that all the pod people have that eventually goes away. But we don't get a close-up shot of this scar. We only get her reaction to it.
Oh, interesting. I think I misunderstood and thought that was the other woman, Catherine, in the bookstore. Wasn't that about her husband, Ted?
It is. You are correct. But in the scene before that, with this, whenever Jeffrey says he gave away the Warriors tickets, like she's like putting his coat on. She's right behind him, and she looks at the back of his neck. But the camera is facing Jeffrey and therefore her because she's behind him. And she gasps, and then the score kicks in, and she, like, lets him go off on his own because whatever she saw on the back of his neck freaked her out.
Okay, I just read this as she doesn't understand who he is because he is such a fanatical sportsman.
Well, because when we get that woman who's freaking out, she says to this woman, oh, and the scar is gone now, right? And the woman says, no, it's still there. And so that's the confusion part.
Yeah. I found an interesting read about that because I thought it was such an interesting twist. Because normally, if you're going to reproduce an entire body, why wouldn't you make it perfect and beautiful? Like, get rid of the blemishes and the scars and all that other kind of stuff. But I love the idea that, no, they copy you down to the cellular level. Everything is the exact same except for your fucking brain. And that was the telltale, is that the husband always hid the scar. And then the fact that he was showing it off, or he wasn't upset at people seeing it, was the sign that he had completely changed.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, I love that there is like an intentional ambiguity across, not to the point where you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on, but there are just little things that the film doesn't go out of its way to explain to you.
Yeah, you piece it together as you go, but also if you don't catch everything, it doesn't matter. It doesn't harm your ability to enjoy the film.
And that's the thing. Maybe your reader's right. Maybe she just had a realization like mid-thought when she was behind him, but I read it as, well, she sees something, but why isn't the film showing us what it is?
Oh, interesting. Now I want to go back and rewatch that scene. Yeah, so because she is so unmoored or upset by this development, because, Jeffrey is just leaving to go and see people. He's got meetings, and she doesn't understand who he is, what he's doing, how he's behaving. So she goes to Matthew's, and we're cooking, and it is, like, so intimate and very kind of sexy, but low-key sexy.
Like, they could have just ordered takeout, but he's, like, making Chinese food.
And he's ordering her around, making sure that she's useful, trying to keep her mind off of things. But also, he's mentioning, I've got this friend, Kibner, psychiatrist. And important to note, Matthew clearly does not actually believe that there is anything wrong because he says you could talk to Kibner about why you think Jeffrey has changed. Not suggesting Jeffrey has changed at all, but rather why she thinks he has.
And see, the way you said that sounds patronizing, but the way Donald Sutherland delivers it does not sound patronizing to me.
It's true, because I am a person who sounds patronizing, but Donald Sutherland makes it sound sexy. I do like the fact that we do say that maybe he's turned gay. in this part.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yes, Matthew, people turn gay overnight.
Yeah, well,
although we are in San Francisco. We also mentioned he could have turned into a Republican.
I love that too.
Well, because I think that's the other sort of natural thing. And I want to have a conversation about the messaging of this film, because I think if you're a Democrat or you're liberal, you might read this and say, well, it's about the dangers of just adopting a hive mind, a group think, like towing the line, whatever Fox News and Friends tells you is going on in the world right now. But I think if you were on the flip side of this, if you were a Republican, if you were conservative, you would say, well, don't buy into the woke hive mind. You know, don't become progressive. Like, you need to think about the dangers of just adopting the trans agenda or the gay agenda.
Yeah, that's no matter what you look at it, like any political ideology, like can be applied to this, like because it's always like, oh, well, it's my side is the right side. Like that's what it is. And
I think I just found it upsetting that I realized that, because for some reason I definitely thought that this was about the dangers of going into a conservative mind frame, but then I realized they would just flip it around and they would use the exact same argument.
I know. And again, for me, like my thing is always like, yeah, but like people that are liberal, like they have these thoughts because they care about other people, which is not what I get from conservatives and Republicans. Like they care about themselves, and so that's again where me personally, that's where I'm drawing the line there. But could I see how anyone of any political ideology could adapt this to their way of thinking? Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
I will choose to join you on the more hopeful, optimist side.
Yeah.
Okay. So we follow Matthew now, so it briefly becomes principally his story. He drops his shirts off at the dry cleaner, and this is where we're introduced to Mr. Tong, who is played by Wood Moy, and he says, "That's not my wife. She's different." And then we see the garbage truck is compacting trash in the background as Matthew says hello to Harry, who is an unhoused singer who hangs out in the park. I like this additional sort of touch of we have a couple of people who aren't really characters, but they populate the world. They let us know that Matthew knows people outside of Elizabeth and Kibner and so on. Mm-hmm. So Matthew tries unsuccessfully to reach Elizabeth. I don't know about you, but the first time, well, this is my first time watching this, so I was definitely like, oh, she's already gone. Jeffrey got her.
Yeah.
But she scares him at work, so she just kind of pops up behind him and grabs him, and she is so upset. And then we kind of double back to hear her part of the day. Why couldn't she be reached? Well, it's because she was following Jeffrey, and he was meeting with weird people and doing weird fucking shit. And I feel strongly about this movie because her reaction is so strong.
Truly, honestly, like her death is the most tragic thing in this movie to me.
Mm-hmm. But I love how even in these moments, right, like she's telling us about this stuff and we're seeing the intimacy growing between the two of them, but also there's just a random shot of a janitor buffering the floor outside their office in partial darkness, like it's gloomy. One of the fun things to do in this film is to track how we actually become increasingly more dark, more shadowy, just more ominous and dread-filled as the film progresses. And yeah, like large portions of the back half of the film are set at night, so it works, but it feels like the sun and the sunniness is being leached out of the movie as we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we get in the car, and Elizabeth is outlining what she believes is this conspiracy. So she tells Matthew the story as we're driving. We're en route to the bookstore because Matthew has had it, and he needs her to speak to Kibner so that he can get this sort of sorted out. We haven't really talked about the score, and I would love for you to try to describe it.
I actually tried to emulate it with my mouth when I was watching this movie, because once we get to like, oh, we know what's happening. The last act of this movie is kind of an extended chase scene.
Oh yeah.
But when we get into the paranoia parts, it's like this wow, 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 wow that keeps happening over and over. So I don't know what instrument they were using, but it kind of reminds me of, I mean, it's not the same, obviously, but when we were discussing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and how Tobe Hooper would go and just play with a bunch of objects to see what sounds they made.
Yeah, so this is done by Denny Zetlin, and it is hard to describe. Like, there's definitely certain passages of the film which are scored slightly differently. I often say bombastic when I don't really know how else to say it except for the fact that it's very noticeable. And I would say that that's the case here, but it doesn't feel histrionic. Like there's a couple of moments where we really lean into the scariness when we're trying to amplify the tension during a chase, but it always feels like something is a little bit off, and I'm going to attribute that in large part to the work of the score.
100%. It's very unsettling because what was the other? We talked about something too recently where it was like, oh, the composer put it in like 5/3 time, which I don't know what the fuck that means, but it's not normal, and so the subconscious effect on the listener is to unsettle them because it doesn't sound right.
It's even not right.
But you may not know why it doesn't sound right. Just something you're picking up is saying this isn't right. And that's what I get from this movie, too.
Yeah. So this is when we get the Running Man sequence. I love the way that this is shot where obviously, we nearly hit him. He's on the car. He's saying they're coming. And we see that people are chasing him. He runs around the corner. We hear him get hit, but we don't see it. And then when they go around the corner in the car, they see that there's just this passive group of people standing looking at this bloody body. We see that there are cops on the scene. No one seems to be helping this man or checking to make sure that he's alive or dead.
Nope.
And then we just drive on because we're going to the bookstore, and what more can we do at the time?
Well, also, I'm pretty sure all the people chasing him are pod people, right? Which I love
100%.
I love how open and in the public that is. Like, but again, in a big city, it's like, another Tuesday.
Right, because I've definitely had some situations living in a big city where something happens. Like I've seen somebody get their tire caught in the streetcar tracks here in Toronto, and they just absolutely eat shit on the pavement, and people will like rush over and help them. But also you don't want to be one of 25 people to go and crowd around somebody because that's kind of scary. That's intimidating. Like one or two people is helpful. More than that, and it becomes whatever the fuck we're seeing on screen here, right? Like I see a large group of people congregating and I start to get nervous.
Yeah. Also, did you notice, and maybe this is just me noticing this, but like the people that are all huddled around the body, like looking at it, about 80% of them are black people.
I didn't notice that.
I guess I just thought, and again, I may be reading too much into it because there's not another black person in this movie, but if I'm reading into it, I was like, okay, well then a lot of like maybe more minority communities were the first ones that were potted by pod people.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, like the movie doesn't really give me anything to say that. It's just for some reason in this particular scene, like almost all the faces we see looking at this body are black people.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation. It doesn't feel like the movie has a strong racial element to it, but I mean, marginalized communities, likely more vulnerable communities, and so on. Yeah, kind of. Okay, so Matthew says, when we get into the bookstore for this book launch party for Kibner, I'm going to call the police, so I'll phone it in. So that's what he goes to do. And Elizabeth is lured away by Catherine. So this is a character played by Rose Kaufman, i.e. the director's wife. And she's talking about how her husband is not her husband. Something's wrong with him. And this is our introduction to... Well, we should note that we've been introduced to Jack Belichick at this point. That's Jeff Goldblum.
Right.
He's got this animosity with Kibner because he's a struggling poet. Kibner has had multiple books. Everybody loves him. Oh, my wife has definitely read everything he's ever written. And we see that Kibner is also very dispassionate. Like I think I wrote in my notes condescending several times. He's very patronizing, and he's treating this woman like, okay, yeah, you're a hysterical bitch, so you just need to calm the fuck down.
Exactly.
Yeah. We do note, though, that when Elizabeth sort of is brought into this so that she can hear what's going on, she notices that Ted, the husband who is not behaving like himself, she's like, that's one of the guys that Jeffrey met with.
Yes. Okay. That's when it all starts coming. Because I honestly forgot that. But I was like, because I forget we had that whole, montage where I think did we already get it? Because I know you mentioned it already, but like.
Yes, we see it when she's telling Matthew in the car. And I think it's super striking the way that it's shot, where we're just seeing her and she's talking about how the city feels like it has changed. But it's this montage of her just feeling more and more very upset, very unmoored, following Jeffrey around, and it's edited so quickly and tightly.
Yeah.
You just think, oh God, you can feel her terror rising as we see it.
Like, it makes me feel stressed out watching the montage. That's, I mean, again, the camera work, there's one specific moment later that I'll talk about when we get to it, but like where the camera does so much of the heavy lifting in terms of like making you feel like these characters do.
I would say the direction and the editing, because it feels like they're so seamlessly intertwined in this movie. Like,
yeah,
I heard people say it's like canted shots. It's not Dutch angles, but the way that we're moving the camera makes us feel unsettled or tense. And then the editing is like, we will start to cut when we want to ramp up the tension.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we have dialed Catherine back down, so Kibner takes Elizabeth as well as Matthew out into the street so that we can have a conversation, and this is where it's so egregious. Like, she's trying to say, okay, so this is what's going on with Jeffrey. He's just not behaving like himself, and Kibner more or less just says, Zzz. Okay, so what you're doing right now is you don't want to be in a relationship. So you're just looking for ways out of this relationship.
Yeah, I think it's a thing where I don't think this is a necessarily positive portrayal of psychiatrists, because I think anyone who is maybe on the fence or anti-psychiatry is going to look at this and be like, well, yeah, look, obviously.
Look at this fucking asshole.
But that's not to say that psychiatrists like this don't exist, because, I mean,
sure.
you brought up the Dr. Phil comparison, but like they do absolutely exist.
Mm-hmm. I did love the line, there's a psychological flu going around, but people get over it in about a day and then they're back to normal.
I know, a hallucinatory flu, as if people just like, the hallucinations are contagious.
Yeah, sure. There's just something in the air. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but also that is kind of what's happening.
Yeah.
It's just that they're not going back to normal. They don't get over it in one day. They're fucking gone.
They are. But okay, so we go from this, which, like this is really, again, I think the last time we will see Kibner as a human, if he is a human in this part. We don't really get to know.
We don't know.
But then we go to one of my favorite sets of this movie, which is the Belichick's mud bath spot.
Yep. The most unusual profession I have seen in a mainstay horror film in quite some time. I didn't know what the fuck we were doing here, but yeah. So Jack goes home and he owns this spa with his wife, Nancy, who was Veronica Cartwright. And our introduction to her is her telling this customer, Mr. Gianni, who was played by David Fisher, that she does play classical Mozart music to help the plants grow. And we do see that there's quite a lot of plants. I'm not going to lie, this didn't look like the most clean of spas, but...
well, it's also the end of the day. There's mud everywhere.
Yeah. But, we see her giving this guy a massage. They're talking about, I want to say, philosophy books, because we're talking about some highfalutin shit here.
Well, but she's talking about it with one of the pod people, because we will learn later that this guy brought the flower into the spa.
Yes, he did.
But again, this is all this downtime where we have these like the conversations characters have with each other in this movie isn't always, I mean, at a certain point it is always about the invasion, but like, I just really like the first half because this world and these characters feel so lived in. And it's these moments, and specifically from Nancy and Veronica Cartwright in these moments too, where we're just like, it's just watching a person just live her life, do her job. And like, some might find that boring, but I find it very captivating.
I truly do not understand how people can watch these kinds of sections of film and then say, oh, well, we didn't need that. Like, I don't think people understand that you wouldn't care about Nancy. You wouldn't care about her relationship with Jack. It wouldn't hurt when we kill Jack and she doesn't know about it and we don't tell her he's dead in the fucking like, those moments don't hit if we don't care about these people.
I don't, because she never, do they tell her before they get split up again?
They never tell her.
Oh, she never.
You have to assume that she would know because he's just not around anymore, but I think it's devastating. I can't tell if Matthew is doing her a service or if he is being mean to her.
Oh, no, I think it's a service. Also, it's kind of one of those things where it's, I mean, if she was asking, where's Jack constantly, but she's not. And
she's not.
Which
Well, I think it makes her a bit more pragmatic. Like, in some ways, a lot of people will say she's the smartest character in the whole film because she also survives the longest, but she does so by figuring out, oh, you just can't show emotion. That's how you have to blend in.
Which is really funny because later, you know, when she says, oh, this is just the same way those rocket ships landed thousands of years ago so the spacemen could mate with the monkeys and apes and create the human race. And I was like,
you're like, wait,
what?
I thought you were smart. Yeah, I mean, she's got a bit of a conspiracy nutter vibe to her. I mean, it's Veronica fucking Cartwright, so of course she's got a little bit of side of kook going on, but...
I saw she has a cameo appearance in The Invasion, by the way.
She does. It's almost more than a cameo. She plays one of Nicole Kidman's patients, and her husband is actively, like... There's suggestions that it's an abusive relationship, and then it's like, oh no,
he's infected.
It's because he's a pod person. He's trying to get her.
Yeah, got it.
It's quite interesting. Yeah. But no, I fully agree with you. Like, you could cut out a lot of this stuff. Like, it could just be, oh, honey, I picked this flower. Yep. And then we move from there. But we get to know who Nancy and Jack are. And I think that's really important because if not, they're just bodies in this movie.
Yeah. Look, you can make a 90-minute movie out of this easily. Like, you can cut things out to make a 90-minute movie. That's 25 minutes gone, but it would have nowhere near the impact.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we know that there's a plant in the mix at the spa. We know that Jack is potentially in danger because we do see him, you know, he's had a long day. So he's going to go in the sauna, he's going to hang out or whatever. We cut to Elizabeth going home and finding that Jeffrey has left her a plant. I love that she says, oh, how sweet. But he is clearly eavesdropping on her conversation with Matthew. And I love that we are told time and time again, and as you noted, Kibner will fully just lay it all out on the table. We don't love, we don't hate, we don't feel those things, we don't care about those things. And yet this feels like jealousy on Jeffrey's behalf, right? Like, you could say he's listening in because they want to get Matthew as well and so on, but there's something scary about this because we know that Jeffrey has changed, but I do kind of love that it still feels like, oh, is he listening in on the potential infidelity?
Well, I don't think that's the case, but
no.
it raises an interesting question for me because, these things, you know, they have no emotion. They don't love, they don't hate. But when someone is coming between them and their plan, I mean, we get the high-pitched scream and the pointing, like, yes, we know. But there does seem to be emotion there almost sometimes.
Yeah, like maybe they're not as closed off, or maybe they didn't get rid of all the humanity as much as they thought.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
Well, but the thing is that they're not, the people's bodies are, if this was a possession thing, I would buy into that more, but it's not.
It's not. No. Okay, so we head back to the spa, and this is where we get our first glimpse at one of these bodies. So Nancy pulls back a sheet, and we get to see it, and you can very clearly tell that it's a facsimile of Jack. It looks a little bit like Jeff Goldblum, but it looks like a badly 3D printed version of him.
Well, because it hasn't fully, like, ungooed itself yet, for lack of a better phrase. Like, it's still like maybe a third of the way through the duplication process, which is why Jack, I love that effect though. Not the effect, but I guess whenever someone's being duplicated and they have to wake them up, but it's like it takes them forever to wake them up.
Yeah, they're in a deep slumber because clearly this thing is just leeching all of that essential info and DNA off of them.
So, okay. From what I gather, like, the hairs on the thing, like, because Jack isn't in this room, I don't think, when this pod person's getting, like, when he's getting duplicated, is he?
No, but there's this really great shot where he lies down to take a nap, and then we see the pod thing in the background, slightly out of focus. So they're a little further away than we will see any other people who are being duplicated. It usually looks like they need to be about side by side.
Right.
But even when Matthew is being co-opted up on the roof of his apartment, the other ones are all next to him, and we don't see any of the other people.
Because they're all sleeping inside.
Yeah, so I think there's probably a radius that they need to be in. But I love how we see how connected they are because, you know, Jack is asleep, but Nancy sees that this doppelganger opens its eyes. And when she freaks out and wakes Jack up, that's when we see the doppelganger close its eyes. But she has run into Jack and he has a nosebleed, and we see that the thing
starts bleeding.
Yeah, and I love that touch.
Yeah, I think, again, there's this intentional ambiguity where it's like, I get mostly the entire process, but there are still some things where I'm like, oh, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And someone might say, oh, well, that's a plot hole, or that's like underdeveloped writing. Whereas to me, I'm like, no, that's scarier.
It's just a mystery. We
I don't
quite know how it works. Like, yeah, I'm glad that we don't get a step-by-step piece. We, again, know enough to understand, to move the plot forward, to keep with the characters, but it does sometimes feel like, well, they don't know, and there's no way for them to figure it out, so we don't know as a result.
The only way this would have happened is if, like, in the Leonard Nimoy scene when he's sedating them, is if he gave them the entire... He kind of does, but not in a bad, lazy way. It's more just like, this is how we are. We survive, blah, blah, blah. But it's not, oh, well, to duplicate people, we have to get a pod. We have to put you next to it, and the tendrils have to touch you.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a villain monologue than it is an exposition dump.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. But I'm so in agreement with you. The dry, flaky skin, and we always see it on the cheeks and the lips and so on. It's really fucking
to
good.
The point where, I mean, look, I know this would have been like not appropriate, but someone just needs to go to Jeff Goldblum and be like, do you need some chapstick, man? Like, it is really obvious that your lips are falling off.
Well, I mean, I'm such a fucking idiot because this is the first time we see it in the film, but I thought, oh, wow, he needed to drink more water because then he went into that sauna and he got real dehydrated. No, dumb fuck. Come on.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Clorox Sentiva smells like grapefruit. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
Okay, we could be here all day. Try Clorox Sentiva for a trusted clean with long-lasting freshness. Also available in lavender and coconut. Use as directed.
Okay, so when we realize that this is what's happening, we call Matthew, and he arrives. He immediately deduces that this thing is like an immature fetus, and we're saying things like, oh, it doesn't have fingerprints yet. Ooh, it's all sorts of weird shit. But Matthew immediately understands, oh, fuck.
I gotta go
everything
talk to
that Elizabeth was saying... That's what's going on here. So he tries to call her and she's sleeping, can't be woken up. Jeffrey leaves the phone off the hook.
Yeah.
So folks, if you don't know how like rotary phones work, go back and listen to our conversation from A Nightmare on Elm Street, because we talked about how if you leave phones off the hook, they will buzz, which is what we hear in this film.
Yeah, it is. But she's too sleepy, so she's not going to hear it.
She's so sleepy because her face is starting to look a little dry and flaky as well.
She says later, like when she's awake, she's like, I feel like I've been poisoned.
Yes. That is such a perfect description because it immediately helps me to understand why she's looking. Because she could have just said, oh, a little groggy or something now.
It feels like a bad hangover.
Poisoned Trace.
Which, again, that's the thing where it's like, well, because the pop people are like, oh, like, you're going to be fine. You're going to like it. I was like,
you're not going to feel anything. Well, maybe you'll feel a little something.
Yeah, well, if you're asleep, I guess. But it's like also like, oh, I'm going to like it. I'm not going to be present for it. Unless for some reason you upload my consciousness to that duplicate too.
Yeah.
Which you don't.
Exactly. Yeah. So, needless to say, Matthew immediately bails on the Belichicks and says, I've got to go and get Elizabeth. So, I love watching him quietly break into this house. Mm-hmm. It's a bit of a heist thing. We've got to sneak around Jeffrey. we cannot wake Elizabeth up, so we've got to carry her down the stairs, out this back door, into the car, and we just hear Jeffrey shriek.
Yeah. Oh, I love it so much. The shriek is because we don't see the pointing even before it. And there's a scene later too where they're all running, and we just hear. I think almost the soundtrack is made up of the shriek sometimes.
It is, yes, yeah, and this feels very. Again, having watched The Faculty first and then watching this, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing. Got it. They fully straight up lifted from this.
Absolutely. Isn't it? I had the same experience as you. Isn't it fun, though, when you go and watch the original of something that's been remade 1,000 times, and you're like, oh, it all comes from the original sometimes.
It all comes from here. Here we go. Yeah.
But yeah, so he finds her double, almost fully formed double, by the way.
Yeah, she comes close more than once in this film, so...
It's like, girl, speed, wake up.
Okay, so we get back to the spa with Elizabeth. So the 4 main characters have been reunited. Before he left, Matthew asked the Belichicks to call Kibner as well, because we need to get him involved. So everybody's there, but the doppelganger is now gone. It's the classic, the body has disappeared. Maybe none of this actually happened, but we do see that the window was open. And if you look, you could see that there's a fucking garbage truck posted outside.
Oh, honestly, this is kind of like the long legs, like Find the Devil game.
Yeah.
Find the inconspicuously placed garbage truck that's back is open that you can totally see all the husks and hair inside of it, because it happens a lot.
Yeah, if we were doing an audio commentary for this film, we could do a drinking game rule of every time you see a fucking garbage truck.
100%.
And we would be terrible at it.
We sure would.
Yeah.
That's something that patrons know all too well.
Indeed, yeah. Okay, so Matthew and Elizabeth arrive. We decide we're going to call the police because something super nefarious is happening, but also we don't want to really get Elizabeth involved in this. So it's just the men. They go back to Jeffrey and Elizabeth's house. And of course, her doppelganger has disappeared. So it just looks like Matthew has lost his mind. And we're really getting into it with the police, but also Kibner, because Kibner doesn't believe any of this. And so you and I 100% agree. He's already been taken over.
Yeah, he's already been overtaken. Also, by the way, this is the scene that I'm talking about the camel work, because
the intimacy between Matthew and Jeffrey when they're fighting, right? We are in the thick of it.
So basically, because we're in this kind of like circle of men, the cops, Kibner, everyone. The cameraman stood in the middle of this circle, handheld the camera and just moved and got into people's faces, swirling, so going back and forth to make it feel like you were actually in the middle of the conversation.
Yes.
Like going back and forth, like in all this pandemonium. And so again, like something like this, I'm like, this is exhausting just because of the camera.
Yeah, but I mean, bukkake camera work, it's really effective.
It is, sure, very much bukkake camera work. Trademark that.
Okay, so we go back to the spa, and this is where Kibner essentially says, you all need to stop. You need to let go of this delusion. People are not being duplicated. They rightfully get very frustrated with him because at this point now, everyone has either been partially duplicated or they have seen the results of it. And they're just like, dude, you need to shut the fuck up and actually start listening to us right now.
And I think that's why, though, it's good that the reveal happens here. Because I feel like if it happened any later, it would be like, come on, y'all. Like, there's a reason he's not believing all of you that are saying this.
Yeah, at some point you need to start questioning, are people still themselves? Because, I mean, that's where the paranoia really comes into play.
Right, but that actually doesn't really happen a lot in this movie, which is surprising.
It is super surprising. Yeah.
Like, it's not even, I'm not even upset about it, but I guess I'm just so used to, like, that being a thing, If it's across the film, or at least just one scene where we're like, we have to do the thing, and like, okay, well, which one of you is not human?
Right, let's take the test. In The Invasion, Nicole Kidman has this wordplay thing that she plays with her son, because, that's the other terrible thing about that movie. She spends half the movie trying to get her kid back from Jeremy Norton because they have shared custody, and so much of the plot is driven by her being like, oh my god, my son, he's out there, I've got to rescue him. And I was like, ugh.
I'm also just going to say this because I feel like people are going to be yelling at you, but I also did not know, and I had to look him up. You got it right. It is Jeremy Northam.
Oh, I've been saying Norton.
Well, because I think you're thinking of Edward Norton, which is what I was doing too.
Okay. Northam. Yes, the guy from The Net with Sandy B.
I was literally about to say, I couldn't tell you a single thing Jeremy Northam's been in, but The Net.
He always plays shitty men.
Yeah.
Always.
There you go.
But he's really good at it. Like, he's actually quite good in this as well.
Yeah, just the movies, meh.
But yeah, like, that's one of the things that Nicole Kidman does with her son to prove to him that she's still human, because she has to play act that she's one of them. But they have this, like, name as many different types of pickles as you can, and that's how she proves it. It sounds as dumb as it is.
How many different types of pickles are there? Jesus.
She and the kid go through like 6 or 7. But we're counting gherkins and other things, you know, like dill, Polish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. I don't know. Whatever.
I know,
okay,
right?
Sure.
I'm just like, oh, this is why I don't play these games. I'm terrible.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, I mean, I guess a pickle is like a man-made thing because it's cucumber, but I was like, are there different breeds of pickle?
Maybe. I mean, you can pickle lots of different things too.
Well, but I guess that maybe there are different breeds of cucumber. I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah. Folks, write in if you know all the different kinds of pickles. No, actually do not.
Actually, I'm a little curious. You can write me.
Oh my God. Write Trace independently. Okay. So it's like the end of the evening. We're starting a new day. New day is dawning. And Matthew tells Kibner of his intention. He's going to fight this. He's going to treat it like an infectious disease. He's going to start calling people and telling we need to put in safety precautions and so on to prevent the spread, to isolate it, to begin studying it, and so on. And Kibner's like, cool. I'm absolutely going to help you. I'm definitely not going to sabotage any of these plans.
Well, I guess he is the reason the calls don't work. But I mean,
yeah,
like it's pretty obvious from second 1 that these are all pot
This is
people.
not going to work.
Yeah,
no. Yeah, this is also the part where we get Nancy and Elizabeth zeroing in on the flowers, and we get the hilarious bit with Nancy where she speculates about, okay, well, it never had to be aliens coming down in their little silver space pods. It could be as something as innocuous as something airborne.
Oh, actually, question for you. If you had to like get an alien invasion, like what kind would you want to have to experience? Because truthfully, I'm not going to lie, this is probably the best one.
I guess you just go to sleep and then you are gone. So I think I'd want to be the Jeffrey in this situation, right?
Yeah, I want to be the first to go.
Yeah, I've routinely said I do not want to try to survive a zombie apocalypse. And if you think of this as a derivation of it, I don't want to know that this stuff is happening and try to fight my way out of it or just know that the odds are so bad in my favor. There's one part where Elizabeth says, I'm just so tired.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, girl, that is some relatable fucking content right there.
I've been replaying The Last of Us Part 2 to prepare for the next season of the show. And every time I play, I'm just like, why?
No.
Why would you try? Why would you try to live in this world?
Just lay down your arms, accept your fate. Leave it to stronger people. You know what? If they really want to make a go of it, that's their prerogative. I'm going to hunker down. I'm going to eat a full fucking bag of corn chips, vomit them up, and then just be done with it. You know what? Take me, Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm done.
My preference is to fall asleep and become a husk, but yeah, that's fine too.
Oh my God. That reveal, though. Okay.
I know.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay. So in the morning, we get this montage of Matthew making calls to city officials because he's doing that. Elizabeth is going to try to test the flower, and we don't get very far on either front.
No, but again, this is the thing where I think, too, the editing really does a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of, like, making you feel as stressed out and paranoid and exhausted as Matthew does in this moment.
This montage of phone calls, it's basically just Donald Sutherland in a fucking phone booth. And yes, we will note that the director, Philip Kaufman, is one of the voices on the phone, but also the man who bangs on the phone booth.
Right.
And, yeah, just watching Matthew try to make these calls, and it does take him way too long to figure out that he is being given the runaround. But the fact that he calls and people start to name him without him identifying himself, or like, oh, you don't have any evidence that this is happening? Oh.
Yeah. So that's apt, because this first montage, I don't think someone calls him by his name unless at the very, very, very end. But then we get another, not really a montage, but he calls people again later in a second scene. And that's every single time they're calling him by his name before he even says it. And it's like, oh, dude. Like,
shit.
Oh, yes, Mr. Kibner came up here and told us. You're crazy.
Yeah. This is also where we see him double backing with the people that he knows were dealing with some infected people. So we revisit Mr. Tong as well as Catherine. And Trace, it's like they had that psychological flu because it's the next day and they're totally convinced that nothing is wrong with their spouses now.
They're totally fine. Oh, yeah, no, they're good. They're good.
Back to normal. Okay, this piece is freaky in its implications, even though it's a small moment. That night, we see Jack trying to find a news report on the radio, and there's nothing.
Yeah.
That tells you so much with just this one little thing, and we don't dwell on it, but you're like, oh my god, they have taken over all of the news.
Because during the first montage of Matthew trying to get someone on the phone, like the only thing they say to him is, "Oh, we appreciate your discretion. Please be discreet. We don't want to cause a panic."
Yes, I love that.
And it's only until I'm guessing either later that day or the next day when he tries again, when I guess maybe they've got enough people, so they're like,
Never mind. JK, we totally know you're fucked.
One guy just straight up just hangs up on him.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, we're up to the scene where Matthew starts to get taken over on the rooftop. And I will say, I anticipated we would get to see another sequence of someone being duplicated in greater detail. This goes on so much longer than I expected. And these, like, I wish that this movie had been considered for some kind of special effects award because this is gorgeous and terrifying.
I don't think we had the special makeup effects Oscar.
I don't think so.
I think that was an 80s.
Because wasn't it Alien that gets it?
Oh!
Maybe?
Best makeup and hairstyling. It came around... Oh. The competitive category was created in 1981 after the Academy received complaints that the makeup work in The Elephant Man was not being honored. I think.
Yes.
So that's makeup and hairstyle. I think Alien won Best Visual Effects, or it was nominated for that. But yeah. So I love that The Elephant Man, by the way, David Lynch's The Elephant Man is what got the Best Makeup Oscar.
Trace, you're laughing. Have you seen The Elephant Man?
No, no. So I'm not laughing because I think it's unworthy of it. I just love that it's a Lynch film.
Yeah, it's wild. That's one of the only films that he gets nominated for Best Director for as well.
Wild. Well, okay.
But I will say, like, those effects are substance level off the charts.
Interesting. Okay, well, shit. I might have to watch that. You know, the Alamo Drafthouse is doing a David Lynch retrospective with, like,
of course,
all of his films, so I might I have seen very few Lynch pre-Twin Peaks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But anyway, so this sequence, I agree. I think it's, to me, because we see this entire process, and I still don't know exactly what happens, but like the pods open up, which I love.
Yes.
This flower comes out. You can see there's something. It almost looks like the alien egg a little bit when the flower opens up. But then these bodies start coming out, and what I love is we see them first. Like head comes out, they're covered in goo and viscous fluid and whatever. We get a long shot, like a wide shot of this entire space, this outdoor space, and we can see that all these bodies that are coming out of the pods are like moving their fingers.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but for some reason that made me just go, oh!
Well, and also I thought that there was just one because it was him. Right. And then we see that he's actually surrounded, like there's one for each of them. The other really, I think, disconcerting piece is that on the soundtrack, they actually are playing a fetal heartbeat. So the sound that you would hear if you go to get your baby checked out before it's born. So this is very much we called them immature fetus earlier, and this is the proof. But it's deliberately meant to put you on edge.
I mean, this whole sequence is, you're just like, what the fuck is going on in this movie?
It's astounding. It's so good. It's so unhinged. And you think, oh my God. And he's surrounded by these fucking things.
Well, and also because we see that the hair off the pod does like become sentient and try to grab his hand.
Little tendrils.
But that's what I'm saying though. Then I'm kind of like, okay, well, do they need to be touching him to do this? Like, what? Again, doesn't matter. I'm just like, I have so many questions.
I wonder if it speeds up the process to have direct access or something. I can just leech it out of you. Because we do see his face get the dry sandpapery look all over again. So I wonder how much of that is like, if I can just reach out and touch you, I can suck up everything, and then that's what leaves you that dry little husk.
Right. I mean, maybe. But luckily, Nancy, I love because again, the way the sound works, because we hear her yelling, Matthew, 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 but it's, again.
It sounds like you're in a dream and someone's trying to wake you up.
Yes, to the point where when she finally does get like full volume, it's kind of, it's almost jolting to the audience member as much as it is for Matthew.
Yeah, well, especially because we know what's happening, and if he doesn't wake up in enough time, super fucking dire consequences. So it's just like, I need him to wake up faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did not time this, but you are right. It's very extended. At most, it's 5 minutes, but it might actually be 5 minutes long. I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like it. It feels like it goes on forever. But so she wakes him up. We wake up the others. They try to call for help, and the power to the apartment gets cut. And then we can see that the street is now being barricaded, and there are shadowy figures descending upon the unit. And from this point on, it is just a full-on chase sequence for the rest of the film.
Here's the thing, though, because at this point, if they are doing this just to get these people, that means everyone else.
They've got everybody.
Yeah, like they are probably the only people left in the city, possibly the world. Who knows? At this point in time, and that, I mean, again, for me, I'm just kind of like, oh man, what's the point in even trying at this point? I know it's like very like.
I mean, it's the human spirit. You got to keep trying, but also, yes, the odds are so overwhelmingly not in your favor at this point.
It's a human spirit. You got to keep trying, but yeah, no, this is terrible.
But also, no. I will just put my face down next to this doppelganger, and Donald Sutherland can just beat me in the face.
I guess.
Not a euphemism.
But yeah, I love that because this is also when we get Matthew calling the cops and getting nowhere because they're finally antagonizing him at this point. But yeah, all these cutaways to the street, these people running around the alleys, like surrounding the apartment. It's all very scary, and it's this cross-cutting that's doing such a good job of it.
Yeah, no, and we're not even seeing the people because the people don't matter anymore. So you just see bodies. It's like bodies in the shadow. So many of them. They're running down the street and so on. And you just think, you got to move. You got to get the fuck out of there. And you got to do it now because there's so many people, because you're in a big city like San Francisco. They're just going to swarm.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's kind of exactly what happens.
Okay, question for you before we continue any further. When Matthew does take out this doppelganger, we hear that it seems to hurt the collective because they all sort of shriek. Does that give you the impression that this is a hive mind thing and that you could then try to kill the queen like we do in The Faculty and several other movies of this ilk?
I would think that if we didn't have this whole thing with Jeffrey going around having meetings with people, talking to people, although I guess you could argue maybe that was just to pass off the pods to spread them out, but
I think so, yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's possible, but
it's one of those things where the film dangles it, but we don't explore it because the film is too fatalistic and nihilistic and there's no hope of winning. So I like that could be an avenue to explore if this movie was going to go in a happier direction, but we don't.
But I do, because truthfully, every time, I mean, I was going to say every time they get a win, but I don't think really anyone gets a win in this movie. So every time they think, oh, we're going to get away this way, or we're going to do this and be fine, it's like immediately, it's like, no. The movie says, no, you are not going to be fine. You can't win. You cannot win.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we were on foot and we are being chased by first people and then also police officers. And then also, there's a fucking helicopter after us. Yeah. So we get cornered. And this is where Jack essentially takes the bullet and says, I'm going to try to lure them away so that the rest of you can survive. And Nancy refuses to leave him. So the two of them go off. And that means that we are just left with Elizabeth and Matthew.
And we are assuming that they are going to be pod people at some point later in the film, if we see them again.
Yes, exactly that. So we see Elizabeth and Matthew go through the red light district, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
They end up hopping into a cab, and the driver, the cabbie, is played by Don Siegel, who is the director of the 1956 film. And I love that these pod people they need to work on their jargon and their codes, because describing the people in the back of the cab as H It's like, these people are type H. I was like, oh, type human?
Yeah. So, okay, I'm glad you caught that too, because in one of these interviews, the writer says, oh, yeah, we really tried to keep it ambiguous about where the cab driver was taking them. You know, was he actually taking them to their destination? Or was he taking them to the pod people? And I was like, I don't know.
It's the latter,
I didn't
clearly.
I didn't think it was ambiguous. I thought it was pretty clear he was taking them to the pod people.
100%, yeah. And then, of course, we get the car being flanked by police officers on these motorcycles. And then we stop at what appears to be some kind of either accident scene or some kind of roadblock. There's cops, there's ambulances, and so on. But I love that the camera doesn't show us Elizabeth and Matthew bailing out of the back.
Yeah.
We stick with the cabbie and the police officer, and then they look and the car door is just open.
Yeah, which I love. Again, it's a different way of shooting a scene like this, because normally you'd be with the protagonists, not the villains.
Yeah. So they end up hiding out in their office because it's a bit of a safe space. But this moment is super intimate. Like, in a more conventional film, they would 100% begin making out, maybe even fuck at this point.
But they're just so scared and exhausted and tired, because also they haven't slept.
No. Yeah, that's the important thing to remember. The timeline in the movie is pretty short, but nobody gets to sleep, so they are running on fumes.
I guess that's my question. Like, if you hypothetically found an airtight vault with an oxygen tank with no pod inside of it, could you sleep and be fine?
I would like to think I would, but I know I would not be able to.
Well, I'm just saying, though, I mean, like, could you still be duplicated if you were, like, in an enclosed space with no pod, you know?
Like, if you had a panic room.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Maybe?
I don't know. Again, not the important questions. I'm just like, for my own knowledge, in case this ever happens to us in real life, I would like
for the inevitable alien invasion to come, Trace wants to know what he can do to save himself, except for the fact that he already said he would prefer to probably just die.
Well, okay, but if I have a panic room that can last me for like 2 years, I can like watch all the movies I never wanted to watch. I never had a chance to watch in my lifetime, you know?
You're like, oh my God, I'm finally going to catch up on those 17 seasons of Supernatural, and then I can die happy.
The first thing I'm going to do if we have an apocalypse is run to LA and try to get any film that was in production that I wanted to see that hadn't been like released yet.
They're coming. Release Batgirl, you motherfuckers.
Know, right? Yes, that.
Okay. So they wake up at night and they're seeing that people are now carrying pods. Like, it's so out in the open.
Yeah.
We're just now watching this be turned into, it's a very sad, it looks like corporate America.
A little bit.
Because it's like, oh, everybody just get in line, collect your pod, go about your way, get on that bus, take it to wherever it needs to go, and so on. And this is where Elizabeth is talking about how they can't stop them. They'll never stop them. And she's so tired. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm exhausted for you.
That's the thing. Truthfully, I can't imagine like it being like 2 a.m. I'm in the middle of sleep, also a poison sleep because I'm being duplicated, and having to wake up and like, again, I'm comparing it to a hangover here, but I have to run around the entirety of San Francisco from these pod people.
Yeah. All day, every day. Hypothetically, for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Although in this case, it's not very long because Jack and Jeffrey and Kibner arrive. And this is a bit devastating because we last saw Jack just making a run for it.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, in this scene, he's saying like he agrees with everything Kibner is saying, which we've already established. No, you hate Kibner. You never agree with anything he says.
You would never agree with him.
I guess important to note, though, too, because Matthew and Elizabeth did take a bunch of speed pills before this happened.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So Kibner reassures them that they don't need to be worried because it's not going to hurt and they will be born into an untroubled world. And this is very Mary Beth from the faculty.
Uh-huh.
We do have to watch as Kibner doses them with a sedative. He injects them with a sedative. And as he is doing this, Matthew... Oh, I wondered if this got you because it really got me. We've just got Matthew saying, David, you're killing me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, this is because he's not actually killing them like right now in this moment, but that's inevitable. Like by doing this.
Putting them to sleep will kill them.
Yeah, exactly. It is. I mean, this whole scene is heartbreaking. And as you said, like if we didn't have all those little moments of humanity and just like not plot relevant, just conversations, like this wouldn't have the same impact.
Yeah. It's so good.
But I mean, Matthew somehow gets out of this and locks Kibner in a freezer, which I love.
Yeah, I mean, we find enough stamina to break bottles over people's heads. And yeah, I do love the fact that we use the dartboard to stab the one guy in the neck. Sure.
Oh, I thought that was Jack that he stabs in the neck, but because he strangles him. Oh, yeah. But nevertheless, Jack's double is gone.
Yeah, exactly. So we do manage to get away, but Kibner, even though he is locked in this freezer, he manages to alert the others because she's shrieking.
I actually do love, because like I think this is the last time we see Leonard Nimoy in this movie, but
I think so.
But yeah, because we leave him, we follow Matthew and Elizabeth, and I just love that we cut back to Leonard Nimoy's face in this freezer window, just shrieking.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I really enjoyed Nimoy's performance in this film. I wasn't sure what to make of him because I do so obviously associate him with Spock. And it felt like we had cast him for the baggage, like the cultural baggage that he brings because he's such a recognizable figure. Like Leonard Nimoy also has a very specific look to him. So you're not going to confuse Leonard Nimoy for any other actor.
Yeah.
But I really liked his performance in this film.
Oh, I agree. And I'm someone who did not grow up on Star Trek. Like, the only Nimoy Spock I have seen is in the Abrams first movie.
Yes, I feel like as we talked about in either our commentary on Supernova or Pitch Black, we both revealed that we know jack shit about Star Trek.
But I know the Spock, I guess because of the Abrams films, I know how Spock's supposed to be characterized. So I guess, would we call this an example of stunt casting in this movie?
I think so.
I feel like it would be at the time. But yeah, to me, this is playing with viewer expectations because I would imagine you walk in expecting him to be a pod person. So I guess that's my question to you is, did you know he was a pod person before he gets in the car with Jeffrey?
I didn't know because our introduction to him, he just seems like an egotistical, like a bit of a fraud. Mm-hmm. That's the impression I got of the book launch. And then I just thought, oh, well, he's a pop psychiatrist. He's doing everything just to publish more books and get rich and famous. And it helped me to understand why I should like Jack more because they're presented in opposition to one another.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think that is the case there. I can only imagine what 78 audiences were thinking of, especially if they were Star Trek fans, what they were making of this character before the reveal.
Yeah, I think you would just bring the idea of Spock and say, oh, he's being rational. He's being, a little bit conservative in not wanting to explore conspiracy and paranoia and so on. But you would think, oh, well, he's a doctor. He's a scientist even.
Right.
Because you would just carry all of that over.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is good in this, though. I mean, he has, like, maybe 5 scenes, but he's good.
He's memorable for the amount of time that he is actually on screen.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it's time to run into Nancy in the stairwell.
Oh, this is my favorite, though, because you mentioned earlier how, like, when Elizabeth meets Matthew, and we think for a moment that she's been duplicated because she's not saying anything. Mm-hmm. They do the same thing here with Nancy, but it goes on for so long. I think we even cut away to something else before we come back and she actually says something.
Yeah, I think this is when we cut back to Kibner.
Oh, you're right. But yeah, it takes her so long to speak. I remember the first time I saw this, I fully thought she was a person.
Yes, and I think you're meant to.
Oh, yeah.
The film anticipates that that's the direction we're going to lean in. So I love that subversion because I 100% was just like, no, they got Nancy too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But no, they didn't. She advises them to hide their emotions and sleep in shifts. And then the three of them leave the building and they try to just sort of blend in. And they're actually doing an okay job of this.
Until,
yeah. I did not know about this.
Really?
No. This was the one thing about this movie that was absolutely not spoiled for me.
That's good.
A fucking dog with a human head. And this is the other piece of the Mars Attacks homage that I have to believe was intentional.
I think you're totally right. And I think actually what they did was they just put a mask on a dog. Like, I think that's what they did here.
It's arguably the least convincing effect, but also it looks so wrong that it feels fucking uncanny.
Well, because it's also in the world of the film, it's wrong because this thing was made because the pod next to the unhoused man and his dog was broken. And so this is a defective duplicate. But I agree with you. Yeah, you can tell it's an effect, but it looks so wrong that I'm still creeped out.
It still works.
Yeah, like it's still effective, even though it looks like not a bad effect. I'm not going to say that, but like it looks like an effect.
Yeah, exactly. But Elizabeth cannot keep her shit together for this. So she freaks out. That obviously is an emotional reaction that none of the pod people would actually have. So she and Matthew go on the run, and we just see Nancy kind of say, "Oh, sorry, guys, I'm out of here." And she slips into the shadows.
Yep. And then we have Matthew and Elizabeth like running into the back of this big ass truck, which coincidentally takes them right to where all the pods are being grown.
Well, I mean, what did you expect when you jumped into a truck with an open back to it that's completely empty? Like, all we have seen is the sort of mass packaging of these pods. It's the only kind of industry that's left. Mm-hmm. So, of course, it takes them. Like, we go to the dock and we think, well, maybe we can get onto a ship. And, yeah.
He's like, let me go look at the ship over here.
It's just like, folks, come on. You can't possibly think, oh, yeah, we'll just be stowaways on this ship that absolutely will not have any pods on it. Like, you have to assume that they're everywhere. But also, Trace Elizabeth is so tired.
They've been sedated, but they still have the speed in their system. But the fact that he leaves her is mind-boggling to me. Like, you know that if someone, I guess maybe he's thinking there's not a pod nearby, but then he goes and sees all the pods. Okay, it's understandable, but I still wouldn't be leaving this woman alone.
It's one of those tricky situations where, in my heart of hearts, at this point, Elizabeth has fully said, like, before we got injected with the sedative, she says, "I love you."
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You could read this as, I love a human being, because there's no human beings left in the world. But it reads as, you know what? I can finally say it because we're at the end point. This is end game situation.
And I like it too because we don't know why she's never said it before, why he's never said it before. Like, why is she and this is the love triangle aspect that I'm very uninterested in, that I love the film doesn't give us any of this information.
See, I would say it's the best way to do this love triangle, where we almost don't care about it in the film world, but then me as an audience member is incredibly emotionally invested in it.
Yes.
Because I'm like, there's so many details I don't know, but I totally read it as the timing was just never right, and then you were with Jeffrey, and I wanted to be a good friend, so I would never, but also the world is ending, and now I'm finally going to say my piece.
Yes, and this is where we get just a heartbreaking moment from Donald Sutherland as he gets back and he finds that Elizabeth has fallen asleep, and
we all know,
and he realizes that she is dead, that she's gone, but that's not the end of it, because he's holding her body, he's crying, he's very upset, and then we just start to hear what sounds like
it's
ripping,
like papers rustling and stuff. Yeah.
And basically, and I don't know how they did this effect, because we see her face start, again, the Blob 88 does this, but that's clearly like a dummy that they're doing. But like this looks like Brooke Adams' face is fully caving in on itself.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that there's a billion ways to do this and have it look like absolute shit, to have it not be convincing, to have zero emotional resonance. This is devastating. This is absolutely horrifying and heartbreaking all at once.
And there's a cut that happens where it's clear when we switch from Brooke Adams to like, crumpling, disintegrating, like prop.
Sure. Yeah.
But that moment where you see her cheek start to just kind of suck down, I mean,
it's amazing.
It's amazing, but it is really hard to watch a character you have grown to really care about have this specific thing happen to them. Like, I think that's why body horror also, I love body horror, but like, it's hard to watch bodily things happen to people that you like. And especially something that's not quote unquote like normal. You know, like this isn't a normal thing to happen to a body.
No. Bodies do not do this.
Not in one fell swoop.
But it's okay, Trace, because, I mean, Elizabeth, the human being, is gone, but answer me this, Elizabeth. Why are you naked?
Yeah, I think apparently they're all supposed to be naked when they come out of the pod, but I will say this.
The rest is drag.
Yeah. Brooke Adams had never done nudity in a film before, but she obviously...
Oh, is this her?
Yeah, this is her.
Oh, I thought it was body double.
Nope,
okay.
not a body double. And so she obviously agreed to the nudity beforehand, so she knew she was going to have to do it. But the day of, she was like, oh, I don't want to do this. My body's not really good, like blah, blah, blah. And
my God, her body is amazing.
Oh, I agree. But I mean, again, like we are all our own worst critics.
Yeah.
But the costume woman, Aggie Rogers, was sitting there doing doing our makeup and just says, you feel this way. There are millions of women all over the world who feel the exact same way. So why don't you go out there and be naked for all the women out there who feel that they don't have great bodies? And that's what she did. And she's naked for the rest of this movie, mind you.
Yeah. I mean, she's not on it extensively, but she is in it for more than I expected. I thought he was going to run away and that would be the end of it. And instead, she becomes the de facto main antagonist for the immediate future.
Well, that's the thing, because there's still 15 minutes left of this movie, but about 10 minutes of it is him running around this warehouse trying to destroy all the pods.
Yeah, and it's okay stuff. I'm not going to lie. At this point, I was so tired. I felt like I had been put through an emotional ringer.
Agreed.
And I was just like, you know what? It's drawn out a little bit longer than I would have liked, but it's so satisfying to watch him just fuck shit up. I wanted this whole place to just go up in a giant fireball.
Even though it means nothing, because there's warehouses like this all over the world with pods.
Of course. Yeah. But it's nice to see. I mean, I think you said earlier, what little wins they get. And I said, well, they get no wins. And I realized, well, that's not entirely correct. Like, will this hurt the pod people in the long run? No.
But it's cathartic.
it's a temporary little fuck you. It's as much as one person could possibly do. And it's a sizable piece of damage because there's a lot of pods here.
Yeah, but to speak to your exhaustion, I think it's just, after losing Elizabeth, we still have Matthew and maybe Nancy, but it's like I mean, Elizabeth is who's the first character we met in this movie. We have followed her from beginning to end, even though, yes, Matthew is technically more of the actual protagonist of this film.
Yeah.
But also, it's just, again, I'm sorry to harp on it, but just this is the only instance where we see this happen to someone, and it happens to the person we have the most emotional connection with in the film.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing that I feel like is obvious, but we should say it out loud because it's a fucking audio medium, it's a reveal. This is how we learn what has happened to all of these people, because up until this point, I still thought we had bodies on ice somewhere. And then when she disintegrates, you put two and two together. You realize what all those fucking dump trucks have been collecting. And you realize, oh no, everyone is gone. There is no fucking happy ending possible.
And I will tell you this. So the 93 Body Snatchers, Meg Tilly is the Jeffrey of the movie, for lack of a better phrase.
You have said this before to me. Yes. Okay.
You do see her to say, basically, whenever she turns, her kid finds out immediately because her kid witnesses her body just cave in on itself. And I mean, honestly, I think it looks as good as this does. I don't think it's a market improvement in effects or anything, but it's still just as effective.
Oh wow, yeah. It's such a powerful moment, and it does help you to realize, oh, wow, this movie really got me to invest in not just this character, but the fate of humanity. And you realize, we know that this is nearly the end of the film. And it's just a question of, can Matthew survive? Because he's not going to stop it. It's just a question of, will the final shot of this movie be him hiding out in the fucking woods waiting to be taken over?
Which for you were like, well, I still hadn't seen him screaming with that face yet. So when we have this epilogue, I guess, where we're just watching Matthew for a good 5 minutes walk around his day-to-day activities.
Yeah.
I will say,
I still thought, though, that he was faking it.
Yeah.
So I thought that he was still human, and he was trying to gather research that he was going to try to find a cure or something, which feels was what they do in The Invasion.
For sure.
We fully discover, some people are immune to this, and we're able to manufacture a fucking cure in a day. It's whatever. But yeah, I thought that's what he was aiming to do. And it's not until, it took me forever. I thought when he sees Elizabeth getting into the elevator and he doesn't even react. I was like, okay,
well,
there it is.
Because it's even before that too, because he walks into their little lab room and she's sitting at one of the desks with like 3 other scientists around her.
Yes.
And he just stares at her. But I thought it was weird that it was like, well, why isn't she noticing him? But maybe it's a thing where like she thinks like he's one of them because he's acting like Nancy was.
Sure. Yeah. This is actually where I'm going to bring in my second and final reference for this film. Okay. So I found a website called Geeking Out About It. And the author of the piece, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978, The Loss of Self, it's attributed to El Kiki 35. I don't know if there's a different way to pronounce that. But they write, he wanders into Elizabeth's apartment and the two of them look at each other, through each other, and don't acknowledge each other's presence. Elizabeth slowly reaches over and turns off a Bunsen burner as if in dismissal of Matthew's presence, and he slowly walks away as if he's forgotten why he stopped there. The clicking of the burner as it slows and stops feels like an acknowledgement of the death of their relationship.
Oh, God,
I was like, oh, I really like that. I mean, my soul just died 5 extra pieces, but because I was watching this and I was like, why are we focusing on this piece? As if to say, oh, well, there's a level of finality to it.
Mm-hmm. So we watch him walk and walk and walk.
Yeah. And then, hey, Nancy's outside. And you can tell that she has been waiting for him. Like she has been hiding out because she still thinks maybe there's a chance that he's there. And this is that moment where, of course, he sees her, knows that she's human, opens the mouth, and the alien shriek comes out, and the movie just fucking ends.
I don't know if the last shot is of his face. No, it is of his face. I was like, is it of his face or is it of her screaming? Because like we're just cutting back and forth between him screaming, him screaming, her screaming, him screaming, her screaming. But yeah, I think we do a freeze frame or something and we just zoom in on his face.
Yep. And that's it.
That's
we
it.
lose.
We definitely fucking do. This is a great movie, honestly.
It's so good, Trace. I mean, this is another one of those, you worry about the classic. Is it going to hold up? Is it going to be as good as you've always heard it is? And spoiler alert, this movie is fucking gold. It is so good.
Yeah, I agree. It just, it's, I was going to say entertaining. It is entertaining, but it's a very effective film. It's a very effective film, but it has moments of levity, albeit they disappear as we get further and further into the film. Yeah. But
they have to, though.
But just like, I mean, again, on a technical level alone, this is a fantastic film. But then you add in all these performances, which are just like, it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, I actually realized I jumped over one of my favorite moments. I swear, 30 seconds.
No, that's fine.
It's where we just focus on Elizabeth and Matthew walking down the street, and they're walking in unison, and then we see people following them, and it's just their feet in unison, and then it's more and more and more feet, and they're all speeding up. The way that Kaufman shoots this film is so good. Like, it's a masterclass in how to create tension out of relatively unscary things.
I know. And to the point where I was kind of like, oh, like Philip Kaufman must be a really like prolific director.
Right? He must have done a bunch of really great stuff. And you're going to tell me he's got a couple of things, and that's it, right?
So he has a couple big things. Like his big thing, he wrote and directed The Unbearable Lightness of Being with Daniel Day-Lewis.
Oh, okay.
Henry and June wrote and directed that.
Yep.
But so he ends his career with 2 films, one great one, one bad one.
Okay.
2000, he directs Quills.
Oh, with Jeffrey Rush.
And I fucking love Quills. I love Quills so much. It is amazing, but also very sad. He ends his career in 2004 with the Ashley Judd thriller Twisted.
Oh, dear.
I know! I was like, what?
I mean, here's the thing. I will die on the hill of give me a bad erotic thriller mystery like any day of the week. That is not one of the better ones.
That's that movie was the death knell of the Ashley Judd thrillers because it was so bad.
Yeah. And I love that run though.
Oh yeah.
So good. I secretly kind of always wish that she would just go back and make a bunch more.
Oh my God, I do too. Yeah, like totally. But anyway. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, great fucking movie.
Really good. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, before we announce what we're covering next week, just some quick housekeeping. If you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Blue Sky and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. If you want to chat with other listeners, you should join our new Horror Queers Discord. But as soon as you can, we've got a link in the show notes. So please come in, talk to us, get off of the hell site that is Facebook, and come have fun.
Yeah.
If you have a moment, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you want even more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. If you subscribe today, you will get 371 hours of Patreon content, including this month's new episodes on Oddity, Opus, Borderline, Death of a Unicorn, and a brand new audio commentary on Sin City for its 20th anniversary. Ooh. But Joe...
Yes.
What are we talking about next week to conclude our theme month of Doppelgangers and Deception?
Okay, so this one also has a pretty fatalistic outlook. It's also set in the 70s, but we get to talk about ladies. Everybody, it's J.D. Vance's utopian film? Ooh, grimdark. We're going to talk about The Stepford Wives. Oh my god, I just realized Nicole Kidman made a remake of this one too.
Oh my god. Also though, okay, low-key, I love the remake of The Stepford Wives.
No.
It is
Save it for next week. We'll talk about Frank Oz's movie.
I know. It's so stupid and funny. But no, yes, the original Stepford Wives, a true horror film. I've only seen this once.
I watched this just recently for White Ladies in Crisis with Gina and Jen, and this movie fucking holds up.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's disappointingly timely and relevant.
Well, I'm sure we'll have more to say on that next week, everyone. But also, if you have only seen the remake, go watch this fucking original, and I mean, shit, we can cross out Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
There we go, and cross out Horror Queers.